Chapter 67. Chu Qingju flipped through the account book in her hand for a long moment before smiling with narrowed eyes at Xiao Ganzi standing below her. You've done well these last few days. She motioned for Mu Jin to give a pouch to Xiao Ganzi. They say that when the water is clear, there are no fish. I know that there is some untruthfulness in here. Chu Qingju closed the account book. She raised a teacup to slowly take a sip. Seeing the smile on Xiao Ganzi's face freeze, she laughed out loud. You can control the ambitions of the stewards, that's your ability. Don't be nervous, I know how it is. Xiao Ganzi's back felt cold. On the surface, he gave a fawning smile as he complimented. Wang Fei is a brilliant tactician. Us small ones are just a joke. It's just that the Wang Fu is complicated, and at times, it's really he didn't know how to say it. He had received benefits in private. Looking at Wang Fei's mien, she probably knew all about it. Chu Qingju nodded. You've done very well, I'm not concerned. His heart instantly dropped back into its place. Xiao Ganzi assured her with a grateful expression. Wang Fei, please don't worry. This one will definitely handle the affairs well. Chu Qingju bestowed him some refreshments and fruits before allowing him to leave. As for the accounts, she didn't look at them anymore and handed them off to Mu Jin. Wang Fei, these people embezzled money. Why not punish them? Yin Liu asked in puzzlement. Why push someone to the cliff? It's not good if it's too extreme. Chu Qingju smiled as she explained, all things in the world have a limit. Is anyone willing to work without accruing some benefits? If they don't work, then they could be punished. Yin Liu's tone had weakened, but she was still dissatisfied with the embezzlement of the servants. Leave room in all matters. Your personality should change, Chu Qingju suggested. Such a minor matter, it isn't worthy of the attention. Hearing this, Yin Liu obediently bowed. Newbie will remember. What Chu Qingju liked about Yin Liu was this quality of hers. Her personality may be impulsive, but she was very obedient and there were no suspicions about her loyalty. Seeing her face so grave, Chu Qingju smiled. It's fine. Accompany me for a walk in the garden. Xiao Ganzi cupped the fruits in his hands as he walked into the garden with a smiling face. The servants he ran into were all respectful. Seeing that he was holding something in his hand, they put all their efforts into complimenting how good the fruits looked. Of course it's good. Wang Fei is kind. She saw that I was tired from running around and bestowed some for me to have a taste. Xiao Ganzi carefully placed the fruits in his pocket, his mouth speaking good things about Wang Fei, and the bystanders who heard him were furiously nodding their heads. Further away, He Heng had been walking with Chen Changxin, Ming He and a few servants behind him. He watched the scene for a long time before observing, this Xiao Ganzi is clever, no wonder Wang Fei prefers him handling the affairs. Chen Changxin's eyebrow slightly moved as he mentioned, a few days ago, Wang Fei said that Xiao Ganzi was worthy of having served by Wang Yi's side. Both his head and legs are very functional. Those words complimented you too, He Heng smiled. It's hard for Wang Fei to manage all the matters of the Fu. Keep an eye out for anyone who are not respectful of Wang Fei. Take care of them immediately. Chen Changxin, as a personal Taijian, had watched Wang Yi give more and more of his heart to Wang Fei. He himself had become more and more respectful of Wang Fei, afraid of offending Wang Fei and causing Wang Yi to be discontent. Hearing Wang Yi's words, he gave a confirmation. Newbie greets Wang Yi. A low and soft voice came from behind him. Chen Changxin turned around to look. It was a low-ranking Yahuan with dark yellow skin and wearing coarse clothes. He instantly frowned. Who was this low-ranking Yahuan who didn't know protocol and came inside to try to meet with Wang Yi? The other Yahuan, when they saw their superiors, the servants carefully avoided them. Who would specially come over? Stand up. Where are you a Yahuan at? How did you get in here? This area was still inside the second door. If the rough Yahuan didn't have duties, they couldn't come in. Chen Gonggong, newbie is from the laundry rooms. The mama who is responsible for delivering the clothes is sick, so newbie replaced her to deliver the clothes to Luo Yinyang's residence. Chen Changxin felt that the voice seemed familiar, but he couldn't remember where he had heard it. He took a furtive look at Wang Yi. Seeing his expressionless face, he knew that Wang Yi was irritated. Before his mouth could open to drive away this delinquent, He saw Wang Fei walking in front of a few Yahuan as she made her way towards them. Greetings to Wang Yi. Greetings to Wang Fei. The servants on both sides both bowed. Chu Qingju smiled as she walked in front of He Heng. Her gaze unconsciously sweeping across the low-ranked Yahuan standing 5 steps away. I didn't think Wang Yi would be here. Just came back from the outside. He Heng smiled as he pulled her hand, pretending that the rough Yahuan didn't exist. Today's weather is good. Let's us have a walk in the garden. Yes, Chu Qingju's eyes roamed around. Acting as if she just realized there was a rough Yahuan standing nearby, she asked, "Where do you serve at? Raise your head and let me take a look at you." This Yahuan raised her head. Her features weren't bad, but the messy hair and the rough skin reduced the pretty nature. Chu Qingju raised an eyebrow. "Why do you look so familiar to the eye?" By then, Qian Changshan recognized who she was. Wasn't this that Ban Xia who had originally been a first-rank Yahuan of Wang Fei before she became Wang Yi's Tongfang? He'd heard that Ban Xia had been demoted from Tongfang to the laundry rooms by Wang Fei. Looking at her now, she really didn't resemble the sweet beauty she'd once been. Wang Fei, newbie sees that she looks like the Ban Xia who had once served Wang Yi and you. Mu Jin bowed, talking in a moderately loud voice. "Did you forget? She recently made a large offense and Wang Fei was kind and didn't throw her out. Just sentenced her to the laundry room." Chu Qingju's face showed an expression of realization. She looked at Ban Xia from top to bottom. If Ban Xia, at the beginning, had been a blooming tender flower, she now was wilted. Ban Xia lowered her head in embarrassment, unconsciously taking a step back. She hadn't thought that she would meet Wang Fei in her grand clothes. Even the Yahuan by Wang Fei's side were more beautiful than her at this time. The clear contrast made her want to hide herself away and not let anyone see her. He Heng glanced casually at Ban Xia, no emotion in his eyes. "Since you are a worker in the laundry room, then stay there to perform your duties. Do not run around the fu." The rims of Ban Xia's eyes reddened. A beat later, she gave a trembling bow. "Newbie will remember." Leave. Since he had become closer and closer to Chu Qingju, he didn't have much interest in the women in the Huyuan. He looked at the average-looking woman in front of him. He couldn't even remember what Ban Xia had looked like originally. Seeing that Wang Yi and Wang Fei were going to stroll in the garden, Ming He personally ushered Ban Xia away. After they exited Ermin, he gave a cold smile. "I advise Ban Xia Gunyang to behave in the future." He pointed at the door of drooping flowers. "This door isn't the entrance for people like you." Ban Xia's body buckled but she gritted her teeth and didn't speak. "Don't blame your Ming Ye for speaking clearly to you. If you play these shameless tricks again, then you wouldn't be walking out on your own next time." Ming He disdainfully examined her. "Why don't you have a good look in the mirror? With Wang Fei present, how can Wang Yi even be attracted to you? You don't find it embarrassing but Ming Ye does." He shook his sleeves as he sedately walked back inside Ermin. Ban Xia stared fixedly at his figure, her eyes lifeless. If one had to say who was the most pleased over these past few days in Jing, there wouldn't be any other choice other than Rui Wang. The Jiangnan case which had been making a storm was now silently suppressed, and he was washed clean of the suspicion of attempting to assassinate his brother. Even the greatest eyesore, Laro Da, was imprisoned. Rui Wang felt that he hadn't been this happy in years, so the sight of his Wang Fei's expressionless face didn't affect his mood. "Speak, what is it?" He Yuan sat at the front, glancing at Qin Bai Lu's dark expression. Qin Bai Lu saw his flippancy and bit the corner of her lips before she confessed, "Tomorrow is Kie's father's day of birth. Does Wang Yi have the time since it is your father's birthday? Then open the food stores to take along some gifts." He Yuan stood. "Ben Wang is busy tomorrow, so I won't accompany you. Have an early rest tonight. Ben Wang is going to see Yuan." Qin Bai Lu looked at He Yuan's back, her eyes slowly becoming cold. Again it was Yuan, Chu Yu Su that whore. Wang Fei, the Yahuan supporting her looked at her worriedly. "It's fine. Send down the order. Ben Wang Fei is going to check the stores." She gave a cold smile. He didn't want to go so she wouldn't beg him. In Duan Wang Fu, Chu Qingju and He Heng wandered around the garden and sat together to read after they eating the evening meal. One person was reading the highly reputable book of Tao, the other was reading a novel. After reading for a while, Hung saw Chu Qingju's face held a hint of anger. He put down the book in his hand and went to her to inquire, "What is written in this book that makes you so angry?" Chu Qingju slammed the book shut, her voice carrying a layer of rage as she snapped, "The men in these stories are too fickle." The two had been in companionship for more than 10 years, but it couldn't compare to the tenderness of a youthful Gunyang. In the end, he wanted to divorce his wife and blamed her for not being loving. When he was studying at the beginning and had no money, he didn't say that when he was being completely supported by his wife. When he left at the start to go to a post in another place, he didn't say that when he left his son and daughter and his elders at home for his wife to support. But when he reached a high position of power, he felt that the wife was lacking in every aspect. But this man had to be the protagonist of the story. The views of this author are disgusting. Hung took away the book in her hand, smiling as he comforted, "Just a story, don't be angry about this kind of thing. A person's days has to be lived by the person. What the end result would be is in the control of the person." He looked with disdain at the name of the author on the book page, Shangguang Gongzi. Most of the people who would use such a name, they are poor scholars. They don't have the bride price to find a wife, and lack the ability to place in the examinations. They have to depend on writing such amusements to earn some money for food and to satisfy their fantasies. We shouldn't argue with this kind of useless men, okay? Chu Qingju snorted. Okay, your entire family. Chapter 68. Mu Jin held an invitation in her hands as she walked into Zhengyuan. She saw Ming He and Yin Liu were guarding at the door and knew that Wang Yi and Wang Fei were still in the room and hadn't risen out of bed. She looked at the already blinding sun and then at the servants waiting in the corner, holding the tools for washing and cleaning. She didn't know how many times the water in their copper basins had already been changed. Yin Liu saw her come and motioned her to be quieter. As she came closer, she saw the flowery invitation in Mu Jin's hand and asked in a light voice, "Whose Fu sent this invitation that you have to personally deliver it?" Mu Jin looked at the tightly shut door. It was Rui Wang Fu that sent it. They are inviting Wang Fei to their Fu to admire the flowers. Didn't they just admire the plum blossoms last winter? Yin Liu knew that her Wang Fei didn't have much of a relationship with Rui Wang Fei. Originally, it had been all right when Ning Wang Fei was still here, but now that Ning Wang Fei left to accompany Ning Wang in the Bright Moon Tower in the Jing suburbs, there wasn't even a mediator. What flower is it this time, peach or pear? Just stop talking so much, Mu Jing glared at her, turning her head to look at Ming He, who had his head down and didn't speak, before she continued to instruct her. Wang Fei will make her own decision on the matter. You really need to change your impulsive personality. Yin Liu smiled embarrassedly. Mu Jin Jejie, don't be angry. I was just muddled for a bit. Just then, sounds came from inside the room. Mu Jin and Yin Liu's expressions disappeared and they stopped talking. Hearing someone call from within, they indicated for the servants, who were holding the jars and basins, to walk in to serve in the morning ablutions. After Chu Qingju washed and rinsed, she rubbed her sore legs and waist. As she picked a long green dress to wear, she gave a yawn and commented, "It seems that Wang Yi's wounds have almost healed." Hung walked up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. He laughed deeply and responded, "Qingju is disliking the fact that this husband put in too much effort last night." Chu Qingju glared at him. Try to at least care about the unmarried Yahuan in the room. Even if he was shameless, she wasn't. She reached out to firmly pinch on his arm. "Wang Yi, did your refinement and manners get eaten?" Hung buried his face in her neck as he laughed. A while later, he released her as he promised. All right, I won't talk anymore. I'm going outside to wait for you to eat the morning meal together." He brushed a kiss at her ear and walked out of the inner room in a good mood. Chu Qingju wiped her ear and sat down in front of the copper mirror. Jin Zhon and Yu Zon finally came out of the corner where they had been silently standing and went to her side to make her hair and apply makeup. Mu Jin walked up behind her, informing in a small voice, Rui Wang Fei has just sent over a message. She has invited you to attend a flower admiration banquet 2 days later. Admiring flowers again? Chu Qingju really felt that Qin Bai Lu could change the topic. Last year, it was making her admire plum blossoms while enduring the snowstorm. Was she now making her endure a rainstorm to admire plum, pear, almond, and cherry blossoms? Isn't today Rui Wang Fei's father's birthday? How does she have the time to have people send out invitations? Chu Qingju felt that Qin Bai Lu had too much energy. Wasn't she tired after doing so many things every day? She herself hadn't thought of putting on any kind of banquet ever. It most likely had been prepared in advance. Mu Jin paused before asking, Wang Fei, should we reply? Chu Qingju turned her head to look at the feishanji that Yuzon had constructed for her. She picked out a pair of tassels to hand to Yuzon before responding, don't be in a rush. There's still 2 more days. Did she have to respond instantly to Qin Bai Lu's invitation? Thinking of the actions of the Rui Wang family, she had the impulse to also commit such actions. If they did so, then everyone should also follow. Mu Jin understood Wang Fei's meaning, tucked the message away and didn't mention it again. After Chu Qingju dressed, she hurriedly reached out in support. Newbie heard that after Ban Xia returned to the laundry room a few days ago, she had been laughed at by many people. Right now, she's the laughingstock of the laundry room. She chose the road. Chu Qingju stood, taking one step at a time as she walked towards the outside. Becoming a joke, she did it to herself. She wasn't laughing at the others' misfortunes, but she didn't sympathize. She only felt heartbreak for this body's original owner. Now that ashes were ashes, dust was dust, hopefully she would have a beautiful future life, and never meet people and events like the ones in this life. Chu Qingju's morning meals were on the side of light but not bland. When He Hung had started spending more time in Zhengyuan, he gradually liked to eat with Chu Qingju. After all this time, he felt that even the Zhengyuan's tea was more tastier than other places. Seeing Chu Qingju come out, he urged, we got up late today. Come have some porridge to prevent the stomach from being harmed due to hunger. Walking to sit down by his side, Chu Qingju washed her hands. She drank a small bowl of porridge and ate some vegetables and pastries before putting down her chopsticks to rinse her mouth. Wang Yi isn't going out today? Chu Qingju waited for He Hung to wipe his hands before asking, just now, I'd received Rui Wang Fu's invitation to attend a flower admiration banquet. I also received San Di's invite. He hung through the cloth at the servant standing at the side, stating blandly, I'll go with you when the time comes. So this flower admiration banquet had been put up by Laro-san and his wife. No wonder Rui Wang Fei had sent the invite on the day of her father's birthday. Even though Qin Bai Lu might be a proud person, she had never been seen tearing down Rui Wang's stage. Since Wang Yi has to reply, when the time comes, send someone to deliver my reply as well. Chu Qingju furrowed her brow, and pushed her voice lower to muse, even though they are hard to interact with, but in the end, he's still your brother. Hearing his Wang Fei making such a conclusion about San Di, an additional hint of smile appeared on He Hung's face. Don't be afraid. If someone is blind enough to try to harass you, just stand up for yourself. For everything, there is still me. Who this someone was, Chu Qingju knew. She smiled and nodded. With Wang Yi's words, I won't worry anymore. He Hung saw her manner and couldn't resist giving another smile. I know you don't like this kind of people. In the future, if it isn't necessary, then we don't have to interact with them. If you get bored, then you can take a walk to the Princess Royal's Fu. Our Fus aren't too far apart. Based on this, after Sai Shu gets married, then isn't it closer to go to Sai Shu's Fu to find Sai Demei? She had just found out that Cheng Wang Fu and Duan Wang Fu were separated by one street. As long as you like, you can go to anyone's home. He Hung reached out to rub her earlobe. He knew inside that, even though Chu Qingju's words seemed like a joke, it was really asking him if it was fine to be close to Cheng Wang Fei in the future. Sai Di is a sincere person. The Luo family in the past has given great care to you in the past. We ought to interact more. Chu Qingju blinked her eyes, her lips curling as she replied, I understand. Just as the two were cozying up, they saw Qian Changxin hurry in from the outside, reporting that the emperor's decree had arrived. Chu Qingju was slightly surprised, but seeing He Hung didn't seem to be surprised at all, she followed him out. After the messenger Taijian finished reading the decree, Chu Qingju understood. This was Qing the Emperor reminding He Hung to go back to work. While most of the imperial decree was worries about his son's wounds, but the conclusion was He Hung should return to work, and he also bestowed down a heap of stuff. If Qingde Emperor's 4 children had to be ranked, then He Yuan had been carried by Qingde Emperor as he grew up, He Hung had been watched by Qingde Emperor as he grew up, He Qi was raised free-range by Qingde Emperor, and as to little student He Ming, he was most likely the freebie that Qingde Emperor had gotten whilst purchasing something incognito. Since the Emperor had personally sent down the decree, He Hung returned a message that was sent into the palace on a fast horse. The gist of it was that this son's wounds were almost healed and that it was unfilial of this son to cause Fu Huang to be worried. In 2 days, San Di was holding a flower admiration banquet. After attending this banquet, this son will concentrate on work, Fu Huangwen Sui, Wan Sui, Wan Sui. The half-pagoda mountain in the northern suburbs of Jing City was famous due to the half-constructed pagoda located halfway. An Bright Moon Tower was constructed at the top of this mountain. Bright Moon Tower's name also had a special origin. Half-pagoda mountain was very tall, and since the wooden tower was constructed at the top of the mountain, it seemed as though it was very close to the moon, thus it was named Bright Moon Tower. He Qi sat by the window looking at the moon hanging in the sky. A long time later, he sighed and mused, time and life, Laro-san was vicious this time. Purposefully using the timber from his own mountain to make arrows to attack Laro, and make people feel that he wouldn't do such an idiotic thing, and then using the thoughts of others to frame him. He just didn't know which of the subordinates gave him the idea. Wei Qingyi heard his sigh. She hesitated before opening. Hasn't Wang Yi ever thought that this matter could be related to a Shu or Sai Shu? Laro-sai doesn't have that kind of manpower, he can't do it even if he wanted. He Qi sat down by her side, even though I'm not entirely clear about Laro-er's personality, but if there really was a good opportunity such as this, I'm afraid he would scheme against both me and Laro-san. Why would he leave Laro-san alone, the one Fu Huang favors the most? I's not worth it. If he was Laro-er, he couldn't bear to let go of such a good chance of 2 birds with an arrow. So why would Laro when he had the ability to do so? Wei Qingyi listened to the entire speech and knew she had thought too much. She exclaimed, Rui Wang is too hateful. I just regret that my actions have affected you and our son, and now you and Zhonga have to endure such difficulties with me. He Qi's expression was slightly bitter. He was much calmer than he had appeared right after being imprisoned, but even so, he had become slightly deflated. I'm the useless one. Wang Yi cannot say such things. We are one family, so we cannot say words of 2 families. Wei Qingyi grasped He Qi's hand. Also, except that there is less people at Bright Moon Tower, there isn't anything else lacking. He Qi gave another sigh and continued to look at the moon in the sky. In the future, when the new emperor ascends the throne, as long it isn't He Yuan, we will be able to leave. He was clear inside. He had failed. The only ones left that could succeed the throne were Laro or Laro-san. Both for himself or for the country, he hoped Laro would succeed. Laro-san's personality wasn't good enough, he wasn't the type to be an emperor. If he became emperor, it would be ruin for the common people. It was a pity that Fu Huang was too partial. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been fighting with Laro-san for so many years. If Fu Huang was even slightly more just, Laro-san would have been out of luck a long time ago. Thinking about this, He Qi ordered, Come, serve me brush and ink. Since he wanted to get something out of the new emperor in the future, then he had to pay the price. 10,000 years, 10,000 years, 10,000 years. Chapter 69 Your Majesty, are you going to flip a name tonight? The Taijian from the Department of Household Affairs, who was responsible for the daily life of the emperor, presented the placards of the Feipin to the emperor. On the tray were the fish-shaped signs which represented the status of each concubine. Qingde Emperor finished reading the message that Laro had presented. He didn't look at the signs and put the folder gently on the table. Tonight, Jin is going to Zhongjing Palace. Jing Guifei has been worried about Duan Wang's wounds these days. She has lost a lot of weight recently. Jin has to go check on her. Yes, the Taijian in charge of recording the life of the emperor wrote down the emperor's words and bowed as he left. Qingde Emperor felt that even though the one he loved was Shu Guifei, Jing Guifei was a clever pearl and a satisfying confidant. When he was irritated, he liked to go sit at Jing Guifei's palace. Thinking about the worry Jing Guifei had gone through these past days, he felt bad. Everyone had seen the heightened attentions the emperor had given Duan Wang and Jing Guifei recently. So when the emperor went to Jing Guifei's place, no one was surprised. It was only Shu Guifei, after hearing of the incident, who reacted by smashing a cup. Wei Shi, that slut, Shu Guifei gasped for breath before speaking to He Yuan sitting below her. Yuana, now that Larodie has fallen, you have to take advantage of the opportunity and not let Wei Shi and her son sneak in. Don't worry, Mu Fei. Even if they wanted to, they have to see if Fu Huang thinks they are worthy. Jing Guifei has played so many tricks, but doesn't Fu Huang still love you the most? He Yuan condescended. Lao always liked to act as though he's so sanctimonious. Some always fall for it. Shu Guifei furrowed her brow. You cannot underestimate Duan Wang. He is regarded as important by the emperor. He must have some skill. Wei Shi, that whore, isn't as favored as me, but after so many years, the emperor still hasn't forgotten her. Even her position isn't lower than mine. You have to be careful of that mother and son's tricks. He Yuan finished listening and objected unhappily. As long as Fu Huang isn't willing, it's futile, no matter what tricks they use. Shu Guifei opened and then closed her mouth. Even though she felt that, over the years, the emperor had been using his heart to care for her, and because of her complaint, he hadn't allowed any other woman of the Hugong to have children, she didn't know why she still felt very insecure deep inside presently. Tomorrow, you are holding a flower admiration banquet at your Fu. Get your wife to become intimate with Jin and Princess. She may not have actual power, but she is the emperor's first daughter. The feelings are naturally different. Shu Guifei raised the teacup to take a drink. The year she married, the emperor didn't care about the objections of the officials of the Ministry of Rites and gave her the title of Princess Royal. No one else can compare to this kind of favoritism from the emperor. In the Da Long dynasty, the previous Princess Royals had mostly been the sisters of the emperor. Almost none had been given to the daughter, but the emperor gave it anyway. He had even posthumously titled Qin Pin, who had given birth to He Guinyan and died as Huang Guifei. It could be seen just how important He Guinyan was to the emperor. Qin Shi's conduct is too proud. This son really has nothing to say to her. Thinking of Qin Bailu, He Yuan unhappily complained, if I knew she was this kind of woman beforehand, Mu Fei should have let me marry Chusha instead. She's better than an uninteresting woman like Qin Bailu. Ridiculous. Shu Guifei was proud, but even she knew that He Yuan's words were outrageous. What is the position of Chusha? What status does Qin Shi have? Behind Qin Shi is the Qin family, which is revered by many scholars. When you married her, you received the support of the Qin clan. How could that fox spirit Chusha help you? Just the conduct of Chang de Gongfu. If they didn't make any more trouble, it would be good fortune. And right now, she is your Asuro. You cannot say this again. What educated and noble family. I can't really see how Qin Shi has the composure of a daughter of an educated and noble family. He Yuan submissively listened to Shu Guifei's admonishment, but still felt dissatisfied with Qin Shi. She has made the Wang Fu a total mess. I get irritated just looking at it. As a popo, there was always a tendency to pick on the Erxifu. After He Yuan complained, Shu Guifei became even more dissatisfied with Qin Baishuang. Qin Shi's birth may be better than Chusha, but her tactics aren't as good as Chusha. Don't be irate. During the great selection, I'll pick a few suitable women for you. He Yuan bowed with his hands together raised in a fist. Then I will have to rely on Mu Fei. He thought that it would be best to pick a woman with more flavor than Chusha, but thinking that Chusha was his Saozi, he didn't say the words that would definitely breach the rules. The flowers are wilting and falling in the night. The flowers carry their fragrances as they float to the ground. Chu Qingju stood on the stone bridge and looked at the red flower petals as they floated in the stream. She couldn't help but think of these two lines of poetry that described spring. She scattered the fish feed into the water and watched as the red koi turned into a swarm. In a happy mood, she ordered, Mu Jin, tomorrow at Rui Wang Fu, I will wear that floor-length wide-sleeved dress with the 100 flowers and butterflies. Such a good spring, it wouldn't let down that beautiful dress. There was no way to avoid it, she was a mortal. She liked wearing beautiful clothes, liked wearing exquisite jewelry. It was already such a tragedy that there was no internet in this era. If she couldn't find some interests, then her days would be too miserable. Yes, those clothes would perfectly fit the swallow ruby and lapis lazuli encrusted headcomb, and that pair of 5-petal jade flower buyao. Mu Jin started to ponder in her head which earrings and bracelets that Chu Qingju should wear. Even the handkerchief, shoes, and the ornaments hanging on the dress had to be matched perfectly. Chu Qingju saw Mu Jin and the other Yuhuan had already started to discuss her outfit and smiled as she leaned against the stone post. Looking at the bottom of the clear water, she narrowed her eyes as she uttered, "No matter what, all I have to be tomorrow is the most beautiful." Didn't Qin Bai Lu like wearing light-colored cloths and act all virtuous and high? As a common person, she could only develop herself towards becoming beautiful and stunning. Thinking about wearing a beautiful dress in a sea of flowers and standing in front of Qin Bai Lu, Chu Qingju strangely felt that she was in a good mood. She knew that Qin Bai Lu looked down on commoners like her. She couldn't stand Qin Bai Lu's conduct either. Since the dislike was mutual, it didn't matter that she would deepen the negativity. "Wang Fei, Luo Yinyang wants to see you." Rui Xiong rushed over and bowed in front of Chu Qingju. Newbie saw that Luo Yinyang's face didn't look well. Something major must have happened. Luo Yinxiu? Her impression of the person was silent and reticent, didn't compete for favor and didn't speak much. Chu Qingju didn't have a deeper impression of her. After hearing Rui Xiong's words, she responded, "Get her to sit in the outer hall, I'll come over immediately." "Yes," Rui Xiong bowed before retreating. "Wang Fei, why would this Luo Yinyang suddenly want to see you?" According to Jin Zon's knowledge, Luo Yinyang was very aware of her role and she didn't have much courage. When she appeared in front of Wang Fei, she usually was shrunk in and didn't dare to speak. On her own, she was asking to speak to Wang Fei. What major event had occurred? Let's see first. Chu Qingju felt that, out of He Heng's concubines, both Jiang Yongyu and Luo Yinxiu, if they had the choice, wouldn't have been willing to be a concubine of a Wang Yi. But they had to accept the reality. In the front hall, right after Chu Qingju sat down, Luo Yinxiu knelt in front of her with a bang. Chu Qingju saw that Luo Yinxiu already had tears streaming down her cheeks. "Wang Fei, Newbie begs Wang Fei to help Newbie." Luo Yinxiu was gasping from crying and couldn't speak properly. "What is this?" "Yin Liu, help Luo Yinyang up." Chu Qingju saw Luo Shi's face had turned entirely red from crying. She asked, "What happened? Tell me first." After Luo Shi brokenly finished talking, Chu Qingju finally understood what had happened. Luo Shi's parents had died when she was young and she had been raised in her Jojo's family. Her Jojo's family had been good to her. Even though her Jojo was only a small and minor 7th-rank official, they made sure that she'd never lacked for nothing. They treated her like she was their own daughter. But right now, Luo Shi had received a letter from her Jojo's family that said her Jojo had died due to illness and was going to be buried 3 days later. Luo Shi wanted to go to the funeral for her Jojo, but as a Cheshire, she wasn't allowed to leave the Fu unless it was for a major matter. Even more so, when the one who had died was her Jojo and not her parents. "Wang Fei, you also have a very good Jojo. Please take some pity on Newbie and let Newbie say farewell to Jojo. Newbie doesn't need very long, it will be fine for me to just kowtow on the day of Jojo's funeral, please." Luo Yinxiu sobbed and knelt again in front of Chu Qingju. When He Heng entered the front hall, what he saw was that scene. He frowned in displeasure. Why did these Cheshire keep bothering Qingju all the time? He was going to speak out, but then he noticed the sympathetic expression on Chu Qingju's face, so he closed his mouth. He walked to sit down next to Chu Qingju. "What is going on?" Luo Yinxiu looked at Wang Yi, her face changing and her heart froze. Would Wang Yi agree to such a thing? She widened her swollen eyes to look at Wang Fei, hoping that Wang Fei would put in a good word for her. Chu Qingju hadn't expected that He Heng would appear at such a time. She looked at Luo Yinxiu. She was just 17 or 18. In her previous life, she would have been a student preparing for the university exams. Luo Shi's Jojo has died of illness. Luo Shi has been raised by her Jojo for so many years, she should go to the funeral. Chu Qingju sighed, "For those who come after, it is good fortune to have a good Jojo." As one of the younger generation, You cannot disappoint your elders. I think Luo Shi could go back for a few days, kowtow more, burn incense and paper money to satisfy her filial piety. He Hung might not like to have the Shiqie running around, but he had already investigated Luo Shi's background. There was nothing suspicious. Additionally, Qingju had only managed to grow up due to her Jojo's care, so it wasn't beneficial for him to contradict Chu Qingju. He nodded and confirmed, "You can make the decision at this time." Hearing this, Luo Yinxiu started crying due to joy and kowtowed heavily towards the two. "Thank Wang Fei, thank Wang Yi." Standing to one side, Mu Jin looked sympathetically at Luo Yinyang. Such a minor matter, yet she had forgotten the order to give thanks in. It was tragic and pitiful. After Luo Shi left, He Hung pinched Chu Qingju's hand gently. "Do you like what I had the servants deliver?" Hearing this, Chu Qingju smiled and informed, "Very beautiful, I'm wearing them tomorrow." From a certain perspective, He Hung's tastes fit what she desired. "As long as you like them." Looking at Chu Qingju's smile, He Hung revealed a satisfied smile. He loved seeing his Wang Fei dressed and adorned beautifully. This preference probably wouldn't change in this lifetime. The highest position in the imperial harem other than the empress. Is imperial, so the title is Imperial Guifei. Chapter 70. Your attack is ineffective since Wang Yi wants you to attend, then you will have to perform well. Qin Bailu picked at her fingernails, which had been dyed yesterday. She glanced at Chu Yusu standing in front of her. "I heard that your musical talents are exceptional. If there's a chance later, you will play for everyone." Chu Yusu's hands, which were hidden in her sleeves, tightened. She knew that Qin Shi was insulting her, but she had no choice but to endure, so she kept her head down. She bowed. "Newbie will remember." Qin Bailu nodded and raised her chin. "Today, many honorable guests will come. Pay attention to your conduct and don't shame the Wang Fu." She didn't look at Chu Yusu as she took a Yahuan's hand and left the room. "Mistress." Yaroshi saw that Chu Yusu's expression wasn't right and rushed forward to support her. She comforted, "Don't be angry, Wang Fei is just jealous of how favored you are." Chu Yusu gave a bitter smile as she sat down on a chair. She turned to look at the Jiao Wei 7-stringed zither, that Wang Yi had sent someone to specially deliver to her. She had been happy for a few days. But this valued Qin was only to be used to ply her talents like a musician. Since Qin Shi thought she was an eyesore, then she will obstruct her eye. Chu Yusu relaxed her fisted hands. Sitting in front of the mirror, she looked at her reflection and forced a smile. "Yaroshi, help me put on my makeup." She wanted Qin Shi to see who would be laughing at the end. When she arrived at Rui Wang Fu for the second time, Chu Qingju felt that her attitude was different compared to last time. She took He Hung's hand as she walked down the carriage and looked at the two magnificent stone lions at the gate of the Wang Fu. She tilted her head to lightly stipulate, "After a few more days, I'll also hold a banquet and make all these people ride in a carriage to our Fu." It wasn't a comfortable experience to sit in a carriage. She felt that it was necessary for others to endure for her as well, just to be fair. He Hung smiled as he looked at her. His gaze swept across the pair of tassels in her hair. He agreed in a low voice, "All right, after getting back, we'll get the servants to start preparing." Chu Qingju noticed his gaze and used a handkerchief to hide the corner of her lip. "Are you satisfied with what you see?" These words were usually said by the male protagonist to the female protagonist in the novels. Chu Qingju felt very dominant. Very satisfied. Qingchu is more stunning than usual. He Hung was very cooperative and followed her lead, even though he didn't understand why his Wang Fei's eyes suddenly became especially spirited. "This one greets Duan Wang Yi, Duan Wang Fei, please come in." The chief stewards had noticed the two exiting the carriage and hurriedly bowed as he walked in front of them. "Wang Yi has been waiting for you to come." "Aren't you He Fu-er? Why are you receiving?" This He Fu-er was a personal Taijian of Laro-san. Usually, he served near Laro-san's side. It was very rare for Laro-san to let him personally receive guests. To come here and receive Wang Yi is this one's good fortune. He Fu-er bowed as he made a motion of welcoming, as long as Wang Yi and Wang Fei doesn't find this one an eyesore. He Hung nodded and, holding Chu Qingju's hand, crossed the main gate of Rui Wang Fu. Was that Duan Wang and Duan Wang Fei who just went in? Tian Jin-ku and Tian Luo-shi came down the carriage and coincidentally saw He Fu-er welcoming the two inside. Tian Jin-ku looked at their backs and asked Tian Luo-shi beside him, "Furen, look." Hearing the request, Tian Luo-shi looked over and also saw the backs of the two before they stepped into the compound. She nodded hesitantly. They look similar. Qingju's manner is more and more imposing these days. The one guiding them is His Highness Rui Wang's personal servant He Fu-er. You must be right. Tian Jin-ku saw that there was someone coming out to receive them and walked with Tian Luo-shi towards the gate. People have to grow up one day. Tian Luo-shi smiled. This is good. It was better to have an imposing aura in the imperial family. She had originally been worried that they would scorn Qingju because of the matter with the San Xiajie of the Chu family. Seeing that Qingju was living well, she could now rest her worries. Thinking about what the Chu family had done, Tian Luo-shi couldn't help but frown. They were a somewhat honorable family. How did they have the shamelessness to do such a thing? It wasn't that their lives were at stake, so why go to become a Kie? Was it because being a Kie for a Wang Yi meant that she became a rank above the rest? In this Jing city, a Di daughter of a duke pursuing to become a Kie. Even if the other was a Wang Yi, it was still a laughingstock. He Fu-er dropped half a step back as he walked behind Chen Changxin, Ming He and the rest. He looked at the back figures of Duan Wang and Duan Wang Fei. He couldn't help but sigh. If his Wang Yi and Wang Fei could be as intimate, he would have a much easier time as a servant. This Duan Wang Fei was really beautiful and Duan Wang was really willing and generous. That jewel on the hair comb was that bright. How many good things were cut up to create such an effect? But women, they had to be like this to have flavor. He might be an impotent Taijian, but he was at least half a man. If Duan Wang Fei had even stronger tactics, there would be no space for the Cheshire of Duan Wang Fu to survive. After he guided the people to their destination, He Fu-er perceptively retreated. Before he left, he received a pouch bestowed by Duan Wang Fei. Even though it wasn't anything rare, but at least she had looked at him, a Taijian, didn't she? By this time, there were members of both sexes present in the pear tree forest. After they heard the Taijian announce the arrival of Duan Wang, they stood to welcome him. He Yuan and Qin Bai Lu personally took a few more steps forward and waited at the entrance for the two to come over. The instant she saw Chu Qingju, the smile on Qin Bai Lu's face became colder. She had always looked down on women that only knew how to dress but didn't have anything of value inside. But Chu Qingju had to appear each time more beautiful than the last time they met. When some women wore a dress embroidered with 100 flowers and butterflies, it was gaudy. Others, however, looked stunning. He Yuan's gaze swept across Chu Qingju beside He Heng, his eyebrow slightly moving. Just a few days, and his Asura seemed even more beautiful. Noticing He Yuan's gaze, He Heng carelessly released Chu Qingju's hand. He took a step forward, managing to walk directly in front of Chu Qingju and smiled as he greeted He Yuan. "We are disturbing San Dime today. Ge is too polite. Why don't we have a drink?" He Yuan made a sweeping motion, indicating for He Heng to walk on his left side. Even though the banquet hadn't been intentionally divided, the men were gathered on the left side drinking while the women were on the right side, drinking tea and eating pastries. Each side were occupied with their own amusements. He Heng's smile didn't change. "Then Yu Xiong will respectfully accept." He commanded Mu Jin and the others, "Serve Wang Fei with great care." "Yes," Mu Jin and the others bowed. "Wang Yi, please rest your heart." He Heng nodded and started to walk with He Yuan to the already prepared tables on the left side. Very quickly, the male guests, who had already arrived, moved forward to greet him. After a ruckus, the He brothers finally managed to sit. Ge has become more attentive to your people." He Yuan raised a wine cup to him, taking a sip. No wonder Jing City is praising Ge and Asura as one of those rare good couples. "San Di is drunk," He Heng mimicked the other in raising a cup and taking a small mouthful. "It is expected for men to be good to their own people. How is it worth to be talked about?" He Yuan's lips curled, his gaze unconsciously starting to search for the figure of Chu Shi. He caught a glimpse, but before he could take a closer look, a wine cup appeared in front of his eyes. Sandy Eyes Fu has such beautiful pear flowers. Let's drink another cup. He Hung smiled with narrowed eyes as he raised the wine cup. Such beautiful scenery, if we don't drink to it, it will be such a waste. That's true. He Yuan turned his eyes away and smiled as he drank with He Hung. Chu Qingju was going to sit down with Qin Bailu, but seeing Tian Luoshe had also come, she turned and walked a few steps towards her. Coming up to support her, she exclaimed, I didn't see Jomu before. Otherwise, I would have come in with you. Tian Luoshe gave a gentle smile and held hands with her as they walked to the tables. She patted the back of the hand, saying, Wang Fei was walking at the front. How could you know what was happening behind? The other womenfolk came forward to greet Chu Qingju, their eyes admiring and shocked as they swept across Chu Qingju's entire body. They couldn't help but be moved. Once Du and Wang Fei appeared, all of them seemed to pale in comparison. Even Rui Wang Fei seemed bland as she stood to the side. Qin Bailu noticed the gazes of the other womenfolk, her smile becoming strained. Hearing a servant report that Jin and Princess had arrived, she turned to welcome the princess. She didn't want to look at Chu Qingju, and also, she didn't want to stand next to her. Demei has already arrived. When Jin and Princess came in, she smiled as she walked to Chu Qingju and Tian Luoshe. She examined Chu Qingju thoroughly before exclaiming, in the past, people described beautiful women by peerless or exquisite. Ben Gong always thought it was just exaggerations, but seeing Demei, I feel that the praises can be true. Such a stunning and peerless beauty. Jie, stop mocking me with so many people present. Otherwise, I can't go outside anymore. Chu Qingju acted along, and lowered her head. You think that I am an easy target, so you're purposefully embarrassing me. Don't be angry. If this beautiful face won't come out anymore for Ben Gong to look at, Ben Gong will have no desire for food or sleep. Jin and Princess bowed. Jie will say sorry to you right now, so my good Demei, don't be angry. Where did this lecture come from? So frivolous and outrageous. Chu Qingju pretended to gently push Jin and Princess and then acted embarrassed by hiding her face as she sat down. When the womenfolk standing nearby saw the scene, they all hid their smiles. But inside, they were all shocked at the intimacy between Jin and Princess and Du and Wang Fei. Rui Wang Fei, sitting nearby, didn't seem to be even part of the same family. Beauty, don't be angry. Don't be angry. Ben Gong will pour tea for you to absolve myself. Jin and Princess really did pour Chu Qingju tea, and with a masculine bow, she went on, please. Chu Qingju instantly smiled as she raised the teacup to take a drink. Ian, it isn't bad. I'll keep you to serve my tea. Are you willing? She could detect Jin and Princess's desire to become closer. Even though she didn't know what the other's objective was, it was clearly not malicious, so she was happy to receive the goodwill. How can I refuse a beauty's wish? Jin and Princess's smile became even brighter. Qin Bailu looked coldly at the interaction between Jin and Princess and Chu Qingju. An icy smile appeared on her face. Wang Yi told her to become intimate with Jin and Princess, but once the princess came, she moved closer to Chusha. What could she do? Once most of the guests had arrived, Qin Bailu announced, Today is such a rare occasion for everyone to honor our Fu with your presence. Our Fu has prepared some songs and dances for everyone to appreciate. I hope everyone would enjoy. When she finished, she clapped her hands. Everyone saw a plainly dressed woman come out, holding a Jiao Wei zither in her hands. After this plainly dressed woman sat down, everyone didn't know what expression to show. Because this woman was the third daughter of the Chu family. This Chu Sangunyang could be considered to be Duan Wang Fei's sister. Rui Wang Fei letting her come out to display her talents like this, was it to embarrass Duan Wang and Duan Wang Fei? Chu Qingju ignored the eyes on her. She smiled and commented to Jin and Princess and Tian Luoshe beside her, this tea isn't bad. The fragrance lingers in the mouth, not common at all. A long time ago on the boat, He Yuan had played the same ploy. Now Qin Bailu was also doing it. Didn't these two have any other tactics to attack their opponent? This type of attack, to her and He Hung, it was all ineffective. One of the 4 famous zithers in Chinese history. Chapter 71. Music produced by females were usually gentle and touching. Chu Qingju leaned back against the cushion, her index finger slowly caressing the rim of her teacup. She watched the flower petals fall on Chu Yusu's hair. The wind blew and the petals all fell down, displaying a special kind of charm. Due to the influence of her profession in the previous life, she liked admiring beauties of all types. A plainly dressed beauty, hair flying in the midst of a rain of flower petals, it was a beautiful scene. Even more so when the beauty's music was also pleasing to the ear. The drizzling rains are moisturizing the streets of the capital, the color of grass can be seen far yet not near, it is the best attribute of summer, and definitely wins over the colors of the capital. Chu Yusu's voice was light as she recited a poem describing the spring. Her fingers stopped moving, leaving behind the perfect ending for the song. The surrounding people woke up from the music. Some clapped while others gasped. But there wasn't anyone who dared to dampen the spirits by mentioning that this Kier was a daughter of a duke. Beautiful person, beautiful song, Hiheng played with the wine cup and praised insincerely, good. To receive a compliment from Ge, that's her good fortune. Chusha may only be Ben Wang's Tsafei, but she is also a Saros Maimai. So she can call Ge brother. He Yuan smiled as he raised a cup to Hiheng, the person is beautiful, the wine even more so. Let's have another cup. Sitting on the right-hand side of Hiheng, He Ming heard the words and felt that they were strange. He looked at the Kier sitting by the Qin, and then at Ge, his brow furrowing. Was San Ge purposefully trying to humiliate Ge? San Di is joking. Hiheng didn't get angry and smiled instead. He gave a disinterested look at Chu Yusu. San Di is gracious enough to have your beloved Kier to play a song for us, and allow us to see what is meant by the person is beautiful, the song even more so. So it should be Ge toasting you. This Qu Su might have been a noble lady of a Gong Fu, but now she was in your Rui Wang Fu. You let your woman come out and display herself, it didn't have anything to do with him. If you don't find that embarrassing, what could he be afraid of? When he finished talking, Hiheng turned to look at He Ming and asked, Sai Di, don't you think we should toast Laro-san? He Ming showed a confused expression as he raised his cup and smiled sincerely. You Di toast San Ji and thanks San Ji for being so welcoming. There's no need to be so polite. Just a Kier, she's nothing worth treasuring. He Yuan gritted his teeth as he drank down the cup of wine, the fire roaring inside. Haha, San Di is very right. Let's drink, let's drink. Hiheng laughed as he raised the cup and called for the people seated nearby to drink as well. Under the pear tree, Chu Yusu's fingernails pierced her palm. A drop of vibrantly crimson blood fell on the Jiao Wei zither. Her jade-like fingertip roughly wiped away the drop. The index finger swiped at the strings and a harsh ambush from 10 sides was played. Ambush from 10 sides, the murderous intent from all sides, the danger from all sides. Your Fu Si Fei has done a good performance. He Guinyan took a drink of tea and smiled as she looked at the woman playing. This Gunyang has brilliant talent and is as beautiful as a flower, and plays such a good zither. No wonder San Di desperately wanted to take her into the Fu. What did having so many skills do for her? Wasn't she still shameless for becoming someone else's Kier? Qin Bailu smiled insincerely at He Guinyan before her gaze fell onto Chu Qingju. That isn't all. It's not just Wang Yi, even I usually like listening to her songs. Saros Maimai is a very rare kind of female. Hearing this, Chu Qingju sighed. It's San Shu and San Demei who have the good fortune. Before I'd married, San Mai lived with my stepmother. We rarely saw each other, much less admire San Mai's musical talents. It's only at Demei's Fu that I have the good fortune. No matter what, I have to thank San Demei. Otherwise, I wouldn't have had many chances to hear San Mai's songs in this lifetime. She smiled, looking deeply moved. It's San Demei who has good fortune, to have such a good assistant in helping to take care of San Shu. He Guinyan couldn't help but feel awe after hearing Chu Qingju's words. She was really worthy of being Demei. She was a perfect match in heaven with Di. Even the way she spoke was the same method of killing without seeing blood. She turned her head to look. As expected, Qin Bailu's expression had changed. Any woman, after hearing such words, wouldn't feel comfortable. What woman was willing to share her husband with a talented and beautiful Kier? Thanks Saro, I hope Asura will have the same good fortune in the future. Qin Bailu raised a teacup and took a drink, trying her best to make the smile on her face appear natural. Not everyone could have this kind of good fortune. I won't try to hope. Chu Qingju gave a wide smile as she continued, just listening isn't very interesting. Sandame, why don't you call some beauties for a dance? That would be enjoyable. Qin Bailu forced out a small smile. The dancers have already been prepared. Since Asura wishes to admire the dances of beautiful women, Di Mai will have the servants prepare. Did she think that Rui Wang Fu was a playhouse, that she could order whatever? Qin Bailu indicated for the already prepared program to continue. Very quickly, dancers in white dresses with green girdles appeared in the garden. There were also musicians accompanying them from the side. The entire garden was filled with noise. As the atmosphere became busier, Chu Qingju's gaze swept across the male guests opposite her. These men were either drinking, changing cups, or using the silver chopsticks to tap along with the music. For some reason, she thought of the song of the pipa player Bai Bai Ju Yi. Written in it was the hairpins and silver combs broke as they were used to tap the beat, the red dress was dirted by spilled wine, this year's cheer repeats next year, the autumn moon and spring winds pass in leisure. This was almost the entire truth. Luxury would disappear. Men were greedy for fresh and beautiful, but a woman's youth was so short. After the best times had passed, where is the man's heart? After watching half of the dancing, He Yuan pointed at the dancer leading the troupe. Ji, what do you think of that one? He Hung smiled as he looked at He Yuan. He slowly drawled, her beauty is above average, but not my type. He Yuan had been waiting for the other's compliment so he could give his brother a beautiful woman. He hadn't thought that He Hung would reply with such words. He stilled for a moment before asking, what is Ji's preference? With one look, the heart feels pleased, that is my preference. He Hung put down the wine cup in his hand. Taking the stance of the elder brother, he lectured seriously, Sandy I, no matter how many beautiful women there are, it's just flowers on the gold. A man shouldn't be too lustful. The so-called houses of beauty and happy dens are the easiest ways to wear down the drive of men. We are all young, we should put more attention on state affairs and try to lessen the burden for Fu Huang. He Yuan didn't manage to give out the woman and got lectured in return, causing him to almost lose the smile on his face. He put his wine cup on the table. Ji is right to scold me. These people are just for pleasure, and cannot be taken seriously. I made Ji worry, it's Didi's fault. I know you are usually mature, I just said a few words. He smiled as he raised the wine cup. Come, drink. He Ming widened his eyes as he watched Ji push away the beauty like this, and managed to scold Sanji as well. He instantly felt all rise for Ji. The story of Rui Wang appreciating the dancing and wanting to give Duan Wang a woman passed into Chu Qingju's ears only when they had started the noon meal. She didn't change expression and blankly stated, to receive a beautiful woman as a gift, that's a good thing. Such a pity you won't be bringing that beauty home. He Guinyan smiled as she wiped her hands dry. She looked at Chu Qingju as she grinned. Maya Di has said, no matter how beautiful the woman, it's still just flowers on the gold. It's enough to have only one who pleases the heart. He also said that men should pay more attention on state affairs. The bunch of womenfolk on the side admired Chu Qingju's good fortune. One said that Rui Wang's conduct was of good taste, another said Duan Wang was illustrious. Both families were complimented, and even He Guinyan was praised for having two good brothers. Chu Qingju heard these people's words and couldn't help but think, the pitiful little fourth he had been forgotten by these womenfolk again. Qin Bailu looked at the happy smile on Chu Qingju's face. The sourness in her heart seemed to have reached her throat. She was the one with higher birth than Chu Qingju, and she was the more talented. Her husband was more favored by Fu Huang, but why was it that the other was better than her in every aspect? Her popo was warm to her husband loved her, and even her clothing and jewelry were more sumptuous than her. She was the one who should be more proud, right? Except for the fact that Chu Qingju was more beautiful, where else could she win? The heavens weren't fair. This type of vulgar woman could have such a good life. But why could she not receive the love of her husband, the satisfaction of her popo, and she had to compete for a man with those shichier who couldn't even be seen out in public? Those ordinary rouge and common powders cannot compare to a Soros's beauty, Qin Bailu opined. It's no surprise that Duan Wang doesn't have an interest in those dancers. These words seemed to be complimenting her, but why did it not sound right? Chu Qingju smiled as she looked at Qin Bailu. San Demei's words are really making me embarrassed. Da Jie had mocked me already and now you've come to take a go. Us women's youth is only these short few years. Whatever beauty that exists, it becomes nothing. Many of the womenfolk had been married for a long time. After hearing Chu Qingju's words, they couldn't help but agree. Duan Wang Fei's words were very truthful. Who hadn't been young once? But out of the people present, some always had the love and respect of their husbands, and some had nothing to say to their husbands. So the thing that is beauty, it can only be for a short time, whose beauty lasts for eternity. In Shi Si Yuan, Chu Yu Su calmly watched as Yarrow she cleaned her wounds. Hearing the chatter and laughter outside, she smiled bitterly. Today, I've lost all my honor. Now, she was regretful but it was too late. Shou Jie. Yarrow she comforted with red eyes. Shou Jie, don't think too much. You still have many days ahead of you. Yes, long days. Chu Yu Su stared dazedly at the half-open door. She remembered the conversation between Duan Wang and Wang Yi. So she was nothing but an amusement. Amusement /N. Chapter 72. After the noon meal, the parade of people spread into the pear forest. They played Tu Hu, I, and ordered a few shows before everyone started to make their farewells. Chu Qingju seemed to be fated to be enemies with Qin Bailu and naturally took the chance to bid farewell. Both Jin and Princess and Tian Luo Shi also stood to make their farewell. Qin Bailu insincerely tried to detain them, and seeing it didn't work, she walked a few steps to send them off. She had just walked a few steps when she saw Duan Wang walked in their direction. She slightly lowered her head, looking only at the corner of Duan Wang's embroidered robe and dark boots. Want to go home? He Hung saw Chu Qingju walk out and knew she wanted to return to the Fu. He saw Jin and Princess was also present and raised his hands in a greeting. Jin and Princess jested, okay, no need to be so polite in front of me. I'll go first, there's no need to send me off. Jie, take care. Chu Qingju bowed slightly. Jin and Princess returned a bow before she took the hand of her Yahuan as she left, not wanting to be a third wheel. Tian Luo Shi naturally wouldn't stand there as well. She spoke a few words to Chu Qingju before leaving as well, leaving behind Chu Qingju, He Heng and the He Yuan couple. It's still early, a Ge and a Soror can still stay for a while. He Yuan put his hands behind his back as he offered, otherwise it would be such a waste of this good spring sunlight. The spring will still remain, it's not a matter of wasting it. He Heng held Chu Qingju's hand. San Di and San Demei don't have to send us off, we shall make our farewells now. If so, we won't forcefully detain you, take care. He Yuan raised his hands in a fist, a silent Qin Bailu bowed as she stood to the side. When she raised her head, she saw that Chu Qingju's hand was held by Duan Wang as they walked away. She suddenly remembered the first time she saw Chu Qingju, it had been at the door to the palace. It had been like this that time, Duan Wang and Chu Qingju's fingers entwined together while she and He Yuan would never walk together. It was only when the figures of the two had disappeared from view that she took her gaze back. Looking at the man 2 steps away from her, she suddenly felt tired. She rubbed her forehead as she expressed, Wang Yi, I'm slightly tired. I'm going back to Zhengyuan to rest. He Yuan expressionlessly nodded. Thinking about what had happened on the banquet, his mood wasn't well and he didn't want to see Qin Bailu either. Go, don't wait for me tonight. Qin Bailu smiled coldly. From a long time ago, she didn't wait for him anymore. A man that would never arrive, why should she wait? The news that Duan Wang turned down a beautiful woman was passed around. Many praised the feelings between Duan Wang and Duan Wang Fei. Duan Wang's reputation for some reason dramatically increased among the womenfolk and he became the standard for noble ladies to pick their husbands. Chu Qingju couldn't help but smile as she heard the discussions outside. She listened as Huang Yang and Jin Zhong cleverly acted out the rumors from outside. She couldn't help but tease, based on what you tell, I'm not even human. It's all unfounded, But you all believe it like it's the truth. Wang Fei, just let them play, otherwise they'll explode. Mu Jin took a cushion to place behind Chu Qingju to help her sit more comfortably. Rui Wang Fei's expression wasn't good when Wang Fei left this time. Newbie thinks she is very discontent with you. We are on different sides, no matter what I do, she would be displeased. Chu Qingju thought about Qin Bailu's conduct at the banquet. She frowned, speculating, it may be that because of Chu Yusu entering Rui Wang Fu that hatred formed and she hates me by association. Mu Jin heard this and thinking of the road that San Xiaojie picked, she sighed. No one thought that San Xiaojie would do such a thing. Newbie thinks that Rui Wang Fu isn't a good destination. Once she finished, she instantly reacted. She couldn't say those words. She bowed down as she pled, Newbie was speaking nonsense. Please forgive me, Wang Fei. There's no need to stick so closely to the rules, Chu Qingju said, you have a steady personality. I believe that you just slipped this time. Mu Jin heard Wang Fei's words and her heart became even more alert. She reminded herself to not slip again in the future. It was all right here where no one else was present. If other people were present, wouldn't they say Wang Fei had no discipline? Wang Fei, Luo Yinyang asks for an audience. Yuzon walked in. Seeing Mu Jin Jejie's expression wasn't right, she lowered her voice to say, Newbie sees that Luo Yinyang's spirits aren't very good. Just let her come in. Chu Qingju thought for a bit but didn't switch to another place to receive Luo Sha. In a short while, she saw Luo Sha docilely walk in. Luo Yin Xiu walked in, and without a word, knelt down. Chu Qingju hurriedly let a servant help her up. What are you doing, Mu Jin? Help Luo Yinyang to a seat. Originally, Newbie shouldn't have come like this to visit Wang Fei, but Newbie is really grateful for Wang Fei's kindness. Luo Yin Xiu's eyes were red. Newbie has nothing to repay Wang Fei except to do a full greeting to express the gratefulness. To want to support your elders but they are already gone is a huge regret of all people. We are women, we cannot even help support those who raised us. If we cannot even see their last moments, how would we face them in death? Chu Qingju sighed. Even though this era was similar to late Tang in terms of the status of men and women, but it was still the man as the sky, the woman as an accessory of the man. There was a rare strong woman, but they were dependent on the power of the maternal family. It was all right for a princess to not want her Fuma, but were there an empress that dared not want the emperor? Men and women were, in the end, not equal in this world. She stood and patted the back of Luo Yin Xiu's hand. Don't think too much right now. Go back and get a good sleep. I understand your desires. She saw the colors that Luo Yin Xiu were wearing were very light and plain. She knew that it was out of desire to observe mourning for her Jojo and didn't have any objections. Luo Yin Xiu wiped away her tears and stood to bow to her. Newbie thanks Wang Fei. Originally, she had thought Wang Fei was arrogant and wouldn't pay attention to one as useless as her. She hadn't thought that she would help her and speak words of comfort. She was a shiqie, one that could be easily taken care of. How Wang Fei treated her, it was her good fortune to enter this Wang Fu. If she encountered a woman more dangerous, she wouldn't have been allowed to wear plain clothes, much less return to her uncle's home for the funeral. Coming of the Zhengyuan, Luo Yin Xiu, with the support of a Yahuan, wiped her tears as she said, Shu Wen, remember Wang Fei's boon today. Even if I cannot repay it all in this lifetime, I have to remember it well. The Yahuan named Shu Wen carefully supported her and observed in a small voice, Mistress, I feel that Wang Fei treats people well, and isn't at all like what Ping Yinyang said. Ping Yinyang is bringing trouble upon herself. Luo Yin Xiu's expression had returned to normal. To weep in this kind of place, it was providing amusement for others. As a Kie, how could she ever shake the prestige of the mistress? Luo Yin Xiu thought about what Ping Zijin had done in the past. 3 years ago, she entered the palace as a female candidate. Because her status wasn't enough, she was bestowed by Jing Guifei to serve His Highness. His Highness was able to give her a position, she should have treasured it. Now it's like this, she lost even His Highness' affections. She lost more than she had gained. Shu Wen nodded. Looking around at the surrounding and seeing no one was around, she furtively said, Newbie feels that Wang Fei is better looking than Ping Yinyang. Wang Yi liking Wang Fei and not Ping Yinyang is right. What does a young girl like you know? Don't mention this in the future, Luo Yinxiu's face darkened. Let's go, help me change once we return. Yes, Shu Wen embarrassedly lowered her head, not daring to speak. He Hung had returned to the royal court, but when he heard the decree Fu Huang had sent down, he couldn't help frown. Let Laro-san take the decree to scold Laro Da. What was the meaning of the decree, hating Laro Da for failing to meet expectations, or wanted to let Laro-san get some revenge? This conduct was too preposterous. He raised his head to look at Qingde Emperor, stepping forward to raise his hands. Fu Huang, a Chen had assumed that since Dage has already reflected in how you tower already, he knows what he did wrong. Why don't Fu Huang give Dage a change? Hunger, Laro Da tried to assassinate you, why do you beg for mercy for him? Qingde Emperor looked at his second son, his face full of surprise and displeasure. Thinking out the message that Laro Da had others send to him where he had explained that he didn't try to assassinate him and there were hints of intentions of ceding to him, he knew that even though Laro Da was imprisoned, he was still in a life-or-death battle with Laro-san. It's not that Chen has the intentions of asking for mercy for Dage. But up until now, Dage had been very reverential of Fu Huang. If Fu Huang scolds him again, Chen is worried that Dage's body won't hold up. Your eldest grandson has just turned 3 years old, can he be without a father? He Hung's voice was full of earnestness as he persuaded, Fu Huang, can you endure the pain of losing a son? I'm saying you can't bear to let your son die, can you say you can bear it? Evidently Qingde Emperor was very moved by these words. His eldest son would not eat or sleep because of his condemnation. If he really died due to that, he, as a father, would really care. So he nodded and concluded, if that's so, then it would be as you say. There won't be a decree condemning him. Jun will send some more books over to let him read and write to cultivate his moral character. Fu Huang is kind and wise. He Hung's face was moved and reverent as he knelt. He Yuan turned his head to look at the scene. His face darkened as he thought, when would he Hung's mouth be clumsy? The court officials standing at the back also knelt down as they shouted the emperor's benevolence, and caused Qingde Emperor to reveal a smile. He praised He Hung, expressing the side of him that was a loving father, before he ended court. After court, He Hung coincidentally managed to be walking together with Minister Luo Changqing. After Luo Changqing made his greetings, He Hung remarked, after a few more days, it would be your daughter's special day. Ben Wang will give early congratulations to Luo Da Ren. Luo Changqing raised his hand and acknowledged, Wang Yi is too polite, great thanks Wang Yi. This appellation, it even omitted the title at the front. It was much more intimate than before. Ancient drinking game, players toss arrows into a pot and the loser drinks. Chapter 73 The Things Missed Today Luo Fu was especially busy. Luxurious sedans of all kinds stopped at the doors of the Luo Fu, and the line was so long it took half the street. The common people watched from far away on the side as the sedans that carried the noble women passed by and started to discuss the matter of Luo Xiaojie's upcoming marriage. The time at which Chu Qingju arrived wasn't too early or too late. Once her sedan appeared, the other sedans quickly moved out to make a path to let her 8-person Wang Fei-ranked sedan smoothly pass through. Getting off the sedan, the person receiving her was Luo Wenyaro's mother Luo Taitai. She reached out to hold Luo Taitai's hand, stopping her from bowing in greeting to her. Luo Taitai, what are you doing? You are my elder, there's no rationale for elders bowing to their descendants. Today is Wen Yaro Meimei's day of adding to the dowry. Coming here is me butting in to receive some of that celebratory cheer. Wang Fei could come, it's bringing light to this humble abode, it isn't butting in. Luo Taitai was smiling widely as she supported her hand to walk into the Fu and usher her into the Huyuan. She saw that many people had already arrived. These people must be on good relations with the Luo family to come at this time to add to the dowry. Tian Luo she might have been Chu Qingju's Jomu, but she hadn't expected that her niece would personally come. Seeing her, she fell into a short daze before revealing a smile. The fact that her niece was honoring her maternal family, it was out of fondness for her. Jumu, Chu Qingju walked over to Tian Luo Shi. She saw that Tian Luo Shi was holding the accounts for Luo Wenyaro's dowry. She casually took a look and said to Luo Taitai behind her, Luo Taitai loves her daughter very much, this dowry is very generous. The other Furen present, when they heard the words, followed with their compliments. The family attitude of the Luo family in placing importance on the next generation was famous in Jing City. Chu Qingju ruminated on the stuff listed on the dowry list. This desire to care for their daughter, it was very rare. As Luo Taitai heard the praises, she smiled as tears ran down. It could be seen she was happy at her daughter's marriage yet sad to part with her daughter. A short while later, everyone started to demand to see the soon-to-be-married bride. Chu Qingju went with the crowd into Luo Wenyaro's room. After entering, she saw Luo Wenyaro wearing a pink dress, her cheeks red as she sat by the window, clearly embarrassed. Luo Laro Taitai was sitting beside her, a benevolent smile on her face. It seemed that she, as an elder, was discussing something with her beloved granddaughter. Chu Qingju's footsteps paused. She felt that this scene before her was very warm and unconsciously gave a smile, holding Tian Luosha's hand as she stood silently at one side. So beautiful, one Furen looked at Luo Wenyaro who had her head lowered, and gasped, "It wasn't so long ago you were just a young Yatu and now you are getting married." She walked in front of Luo Taitai and gently patted her hand. As her aunt, I don't have anything good to give her, but these things are just a token of my love as an elder. Once she finished, the Yahuan behind her revealed the gifts. Chu Qingju found that inside were 2 pairs of bangles, 2 pairs of earring, 2 buyao, and 2 sets of jade artifacts. The craftsmanship of all these objects were very fine. It seemed that this aunt of Luo Wenyaro's had put some thought in. The close relatives of the Luo family started to give out the objects to add to the dowry. Tian Luosha, as the aunt, didn't give jade artifacts or jewelry. She straightforwardly gave out the deeds to the land and house for a shop. It was an exceedingly generous gift. Of course, it also implied her position in the Tian family. After the relatives presented, then it was time for the friends. As a Wang Fei, Chu Qingju naturally wouldn't be left until last. She indicated for the Yahuan behind her to present what she had brought. She walked next to Luo Wenyaro, gently holding her hand to say, "According to age, you are some months younger than me. It's appropriate for me to call you Mai." Luo Wenyaro's face was crimson as she bowed, "Jejie." Chu Qingju smiled as she touched the other's delicate face. 15 years old, still half a child, and to be married in this ancient time. She suddenly thought about the Go Gen Destroys Wu from the previous life's humanities classes. There was a phrase, if a woman is not married by 17, her parents are at fault, which used to be a great target for mockery by everyone. Now that she was living at this place, she knew how real it was. You have to remember, a woman can be virtuous, can be dignified but cannot forget to be good to herself. Chu Qingju slightly lowered her head, and spoke at a volume by Luo Wenyaro's ear that only the two of them could hear. Don't assume that, as a Wang Fei, you have to be careful with speech and laughter. Everything else is fake. To have your husband be good to you is the best tactic of all. You have to remember he isn't just a Wang Yi, he is also a man. Speaking to that point, Chu Qingju didn't go any further. She took a step back. Looking at Luo Wenyaro's face that was bursting with blood, she couldn't resist touching her face again. Such a good girl, little student Ming better not disappoint her. Luo Wenyaro looked at the smiling woman in front of her. For some reason unknown, she put what she had just heard deep into her heart. Even though the two had only met a few times, but she felt what the other said was the truth and the conduct of the other was good. A beat later, she nodded her head gravely. "Jejie, Mai will remember." In that pair of large eyes were reverence and trust. The others thought that they spoke a few words due to the similar age of the two and that they would be jolie in the future. They definitely wouldn't have thought that Chu Qingju was teaching Luo Wenyaro the skills to manage her husband. They looked at the gifts that Duan Wang Fei was adding to the dowry and had to admit to themselves that Duan Wang Fei was one that repaid the kindness done to her. A phoenix blood jade pendant, ruby hair comb, mutton fat bangles, 12 double-sided embroidered silk handkerchiefs, a whole set of pearl hair ornaments, and a dotted jade buyao. Those were all rare objects on their own, and Duan Wang Fei had given so many. It could be seen that she still remembered the kindness of the Luo family from the past. Thinking about that, everyone laughed on the inside at Chang de Gongfu. Neglecting an eldest Di daughter. Now this eldest Di daughter was grown, she was estranged from them. The second Di daughter that was put on their hearts rushed up to become a Kye. This was already a laughingstock in Jing City. They had to wonder, did the people of Changde Gongfu have the courage to leave their home? Not long after, even the Princess Royal and some of the Feipin from the palace sent people to add to the dowry. It could be seen that the importance placed on the Luo family, and expressed the fact that after Luo when Yarrow married, she wouldn't be slighted by the imperial family. After the guests left, Luo when Yarrow sat by the window. Thinking of Chu Qingju's words, her face flushed. She twisted to look at her grandmother that was keeping her company and expressed in a small voice, "Grandmother, Duan Wang Fei is a good person." Luo Laro Tai Tai heard her granddaughter's words and smiled. "Duan Wang Fei might not be a good person, but she hasn't treated you badly. Yarrow Ya too, you have to remember, tomorrow, you will be marrying into the imperial family. The people good to you might not be good, the people true to you might not be true." Luo when Yarrow nodded. She hesitated before commenting. For some reason, from the first time granddaughter met Duan Wang Fei, there was a feeling of closeness. Was granddaughter too impulsive? "You usually are calm and steady, grandmother knows that." Luo Laro Tai Tai shook her head. She reached out to straighten the slightly askew buyao in her granddaughter's hair. She smiled and replied, "In this world, destiny is important. If you feel you can be close friends with someone, then look and think more. In the end, that will tell you if your instincts are right or not." Luo Win Yarrow ruminated before lowering her head, confirming, "Granddaughter will remember." Even Duan Wang Fei didn't always have smooth sailing. When she had just married, she wasn't favored by Duan Wang. At that time, she had to endure Liang Shi's attitude when she went home, Luo Laro Tai Tai said ruefully, but who knew that after 2 short months, Duan Wang started to be seriously attached to her, and for her, created conflict with Changde Gongfu. It can be seen that Duan Wang Fei is a very outstanding woman. As she finished listening to her grandmother's words, Luo Wen Yarrow's worship of Chu Qingju became even greater. If a woman like Duan Wang Fei couldn't receive the affections of her husband, then it meant Duan Wang's eyes were too lacking. After finishing adding to Luo Wen Yarrow's dowry and staying in Luo Fu to eat a meal, Chu Qingju sat on the sedan to return to the Fu. From the outside of the sedan came sounds of peddling. She brushed aside the curtain and saw a stall not far away selling stewed eggs. It didn't look extremely clean, but the fragrance drifted into the nose. "Stop." As Chu Qingju spoke, the sedan slowly stopped. Wang Fei, Huang Yang walked to the window of the sedan and asked in a small voice, "Has something happened?" Chu Qingju peeked from behind the curtain. "I see that the stewed eggs seem fragrant, buy some for a taste. Get the owner to add some of the soup. After returning to the Fu, it has to be heated so the taste will not change." Hearing this, Huang Yang turned his head to look at the stewed egg stall at the side of the street. He jogged in front of the stall and took out a handful of copper, buying a dozen or which were then wrapped with lotus leaves. He held a bowl filled with the stew as he ran back to the side of the sedan, informing in a small voice, "Wang Fei, this one has bought them. Yen, let's return." Chu Qingju rubbed her nose. Even though she wanted to taste one now, due to the need for appearances, she resisted the craving. The old woman that sold the stewed eggs didn't expect that her food would be bought by an important person one day. Her face was full of excitement as she looked at the red and yellow sedan leave, muttering, "The heavens, that was a noble." The passers-by saw that even a noble and relative of the imperial family had bought the stewed eggs, and for a time, many bought a few for a taste. This was something that even a noble liked to eat. Not far away, He Yuan sat on a horse as he looked at the stewed egg stall surrounded by people. He frowned as he raised his horse whip to point to the stall. He Fu-er, go buy a few. He Fu-er quickly left with 2 guards. He pushed into the crowd and brought a few stewed eggs before squeezing out of the crowd. Taking them to He Yuan, he warned, "Wang Yi, the food on the street isn't clean, don't eat too much." Looking at the unsightly egg, He Yuan used a white handkerchief to hold the already peeled egg. He hesitated before taking a bite. The egg had been cooked for a long time, it was tough and slightly salty, but the smell was very special. "What is this? Just throw it away." He Yuan ate a whole egg before wiping his hands and throwing the handkerchief away. He ordered coldly, "Return to the Fu." He Fu blanked. When he raised his head, Wang Yi was already far away on his horse. He turned to carelessly shove the stewed egg wrapped in lotus leaves to one of the children on the street and jogged to catch up. The child that had the egg shoved into his hand stared dazedly at the back of He Fu. He unwrapped the egg and took a bite, instantly giving a smile. Dao Popo's stewed eggs were really flavorful, so delicious. That rich person has terrible sense to pass on something this good. Chapter 74. Jealousy. On the day of He Ming's marriage, Chu Qingju and Jin and Princess received the womenfolk who'd arrived for the celebration as the mistresses of the house. Now that Ning Wangfei was under house arrest in Bright Moon Tower, Chu Qingju held seniority among the Wangfei. For this wedding of He Ming, her little brother-in-law, even if she wanted to be lazy, she couldn't avoid it. The womenfolk were fine. Order a few cheerful plays, put out some fruit and refreshments and chit-chat. It wasn't very difficult. But it was more complicated on the men's side. It didn't just touch on the personal interests of some, they had to pay attention to people who were drunk and would cause an unfortunate disturbance. Additionally, He Yuan wasn't willing to demean himself by receiving guests, so He Heng and some of the officials of the Ministry of Rites had to organize the guests. Even if it seemed busy, most of those who came were smart. They wouldn't cause a disturbance at this kind of setting, and wouldn't try to find trouble. Most of them respectfully sat down and waited for the wedding to begin. Jin and Princess paid attention to the time. Not long after, a Taijian ran over and reported that the wedding sedan was almost at its destination. A crowd of women stood to walk to the front hall and waited for the couple to bow to the heaven and earth. Chu Qingju and Jin and Princess stood together. She swept a gaze across the hall. The men and women stood at their own sides, the men on the left and women on the right, clearly divided. In a short while, the music sounded. She tilted her head to look and saw He Ming wearing the bright red wedding clothes, his hand holding one end of a red silk cord as he walked in from the outside. On the other side of the red silk cord was Luo Wenyaro, who was wearing a phoenix crown and cape. While Qingde Emperor and the Empress didn't personally attend, their gifts had been sent down very early beforehand. Chu Qingju watched as the couple bowed to the empty seats above them and once again looked down on the imperial house. The father wasn't present when the son got married. Was there even any meaning left when the imperial father and son were like this? When the three brothers in front of He Ming had married, Qingde Emperor had personally written out a celebratory speech to be read at each of the ceremonies, expressing the regret of his absence and wished to make up for such a deficiency. Why wasn't there one when it was He Ming's turn? After the ceremony, Chu Qingju and the others followed the newly wedded pair to their bridal rooms and waited for He Ming to lift the bride's veil. The bridal rooms were very busy. Chu Qingju even saw Jin and Princess's two children. She watched as He Ming slowly lifted the bride's veil. Underneath it, Luo Wenyaro's face was full of bashfulness, like a flower just before blooming. Some said that a woman was most beautiful on the day of her marriage. Chu Qingju smiled at the bashful Luo Wenyaro and had to admit it was true. She and Jin and Princess smiled as they came forward to say some lucky words. After the children received their red packets, they ushered everyone out and left a silent space for the newlyweds. Coming out of the bridal room, Jin and Princess looked at the darkening sky. She smiled as she reminisced, "That year I was married, the Didi were still all children. Now, all of them are married." Chu Qingju guessed that Jin and Princess was thinking of her failed marriage, comforting, "Time is like flowing water, Jejia doesn't have to be sad." Listening to the noise from the banquet in front of them, Jin and Princess smiled as she glanced at Chu Qingju. "You are assuming that I am sad over what happened with the Count of Beilu?" She laughed. "Right now, I am the Princess Royal, I have a son and daughter, and they have their titles. What do I need to be sad about?" Chu Qingju hadn't thought Jin and Princess would say such unaffected words and stilled before conceding, "It's me that was mistaken." Jin and Princess shook her head. "When the Count of Beilu betrayed me in the beginning, he should have thought of the conclusion. I am the daughter of the Emperor, he underestimated the people of the imperial family. Maybe it came about because of the imperial family were too courteous to him when they used to return to Jing, and that made him forget what they were truly like." Chu Qingju felt that Jin and Princess was extremely domineering right now. As they walked closer to the wedding banquet, she looked ahead and hesitated before speaking. A few days ago, a subordinate of my Wang Yi came back from Jingju. I heard him say that 9th grade official's daughter died from sickness. The Count of Beilu hasn't stepped out of his home and even sent up a request to transfer the title to his DD. Fu Huang will not agree. Jin and Princess smiled as she explained, this title, until the Count of Beilu dies, will always be on his head. But after he dies, it isn't certain that this title will still be the Cao family's. Chu Qingju looked at the smile on Jin and Princess's face, instantly feeling reverence. This was what a true woman should be like. At the wedding banquet, He Hung occasionally drank a cup with the guest, but most of the time, he only had to sit to one side and wait for others to come to him. Looking at the noisy play on stage, he gave a yawn of disinterest. Ge is tired. Sitting by his side, He Yuan played with the wine cup, looking lazy. Now that Larosai has married, he will get busy in the future. He Hung didn't seem to hear the implication in his words. He raised the wine cup and swirled the contents. With a Wang Fei to care for him, Sai Di will have more relaxing days. He Yuan snorted. When did Ge become so simple? Didi finds it very unexpected. He Hung was pretending not to understand his words, still acting in front of him. He Hung gave a warm smile as he responded, Ge is always like this. It was San Di who didn't know before today. The corner of He Yuan's lips jerked. He turned his head to avoid looking at He Hung's expression and saw his eldest sister and Duan Wang Fei emerge from the back and walk to the female side. He frowned as his gaze landed on Qin Bailu, who had been seated the whole time. The hand which held the wine cup tightened. They were both Wang Fei, but why was the difference in conduct so large? The noise eventually had to quiet down. When Chu Qingju and He Hung came out of Cheng Wang Fu, it was already the deep of the night. She inhaled, watching as the guards surrounded Jin and Princess as she left, before she said, we can finally return and rest. He Hung helped tie her cloak. Let's go back. Ge and Sao, take care. Chu Qingju turned her head and saw He Yuan and Qin Bailu walking together with a stride length between them. Qin Bailu's expression didn't seem right. San Shu, San Demei, Chu Qingju smiled, it's late, you two should return and rest too. Thanks for the concern, Sao. Of course we know to rest, Qin Bailu calmly said. Today, Sao was very busy, don't exhaust yourself. It was easy to detect the queerness in her tone. He Hung's brows furrowed slightly, his eyes instantly becoming cold. Even the smile on his lips disappeared without a trace. It was only the fact that the other was his Demei that he didn't speak. Shut up, He Yuan snapped, if you're tired, then go to the carriage and rest. Qin Bailu's expression changed as she coldly answered, if that's the case, Kie will leave first. Wang Yi can do as he pleases. She really did abandon He Yuan to leave first, and didn't even care that He Hung was present. Chu Qingju felt that Qin Bailu painted a gigantic black dot on the reputation of the Qin family as an educated and noble family. And this stain couldn't be washed out, and couldn't be brushed off. He Yuan's face was so dark, ink could be squeezed out of it. He managed to raise his hands to the two and state, Ge, Sao, you go first. He said to Chu Qingju, Sao, forgive me for the wife's ill manners, and for letting you see such a joke. This wasn't the first time I've seen your embarrassments. Chu Qingju smiled calmly as she replied, it might be that Demei isn't feeling well. San Shu should go take a look. We don't live very far from here and can get back to the Fu very quickly. You go first. He Yuan nodded, goodbye. Chu Qingju reached out to hug He Hung's arm, whispering in his ear, our San Demei's temper isn't soft at all. He Hung smiled coldly, wrapping an arm around her waist to enter the carriage before declaring, the Qin family raised a good daughter. Chu Qingju listened to the tone of his voice and had the impression of it expressing wait and see. She smiled, who cares whose daughter she is? It has nothing to do with us. He Hung embraced the other in his arms, gently patting her back. A long time later, he stated, don't worry. In the future, no one would dare to be disrespectful to you. The person in his embrace didn't speak. A beat later, he lowered his head to look but only saw the other's sleeping visage. He smiled helplessly. It seemed that today had exhausted her. Clang. A blue ink porcelain teapot smashed onto the floor. He Yuan angrily pointed at Qin Bailu. Look at what you've done. How does it look like anything a proper lady would do? Even an uneducated shrew would be better. Ben Wang gets angry just looking at you. Who do you not get angry looking at? Lu He in the Dong Yuan, Qing Liu, or that whore in Shi Yuan? The women of the Chu family are all fox spirits, but you men stop moving after taking a look. He Yuan dealt a blow to Qin Bailu's face, making her stagger. He expressionlessly looked at Qin Bailu, who was covering her face. Before saying this, think of your position. If you feel that you can't stay in my Rui Wang Fu any longer, then get out and stay in your paternal home for the rest of your life. Don't come here to be an eyesore. Qin Bailu covered her face. That slap had been extremely heavy. She still felt her ears ringing. She raised her head to look at He Yuan. From the other's handsome face, other than dislike for her, she couldn't see anything else. She looked dazedly at the man, her tears streaming. The Qin family is an educated and noble family. Don't stain the Qin family's reputation. My Da Long dynasty has had Wang Yi in the past who'd divorced their wives. If you don't accept, you could try. He Yuan took out a handkerchief to wipe his hands in disgust. He turned and left the room, not looking once at Qin Bailu. It didn't matter how noble the Xiajie of the Qin family were. He was an imperial son, a Wang Yi. If she married him, she had to obey his rules. If she couldn't obey, then get out. Wang Fei, seeing that Wang Yi had left, the Yahuan who served Qin Bailu hurriedly supported her to a seat. She got others to bring a towel and medicine. The Zheng Yuan quickly descended into chaos. Qin Bailu was crying and laughing. I can't even scold that Chu family whore. Just a Cheshire, but Wang Yi treats me like so for her. That whore has good tricks. Wang Fei, why do this? Are you Hua, one of the Yahuan who was part of Qin Bailu's dowry, had reddened eyes as she helped put on medicine for Qin Bailu. No matter how Chusha is, she's just a Kie. Why be hostile against Wang Yi for her? Qin Bailu woodenly looked at the darkness outside the door. Come say, which part of Chu Qingju is stronger than me? Do men really place such importance on a woman's face? Are you Hua asked in confusion. Wang Fei, why are you mentioning Duan Wang Fei? Why is it that I can't receive what she can get? Qin Bailu still remembered the rumors before the marriage decree. At that time, there were people saying that the emperor wanted to marry Chu Qingju to Wang Yi and her to Duan Wang. However, the decision had been changed at the last minute for some reason. She had rejoiced that she was engaged to Rui Wang because Rui Wang was more favored by the emperor than Duan Wang. And 2 years ago, she'd seen Rui Wang in the palace once. She had silently given her heart away. Yu Hua didn't understand why her Wang Fei would have that kind of idea. After she applied the medicine, she carefully said, how Duan Wang Fei lives, only she knows. What we usually see might only be intentional. Wang Fei, you have no need to compete with Duan Wang Fei. You have to know that, other than a face, she is less than you in every other aspect. Qin Bailu listened to her words and suddenly laughed. Yes, I want to see just how long she can be proud. She wasn't living well and so she couldn't bear to see people who were lesser than her have better lives. Chapter 75 Intelligence determines taste. The morning after Cheng Wang's wedding day, he took his wife to the palace for the formal greeting. The emperor might have been indifferent to his youngest son, but on the surface, he didn't slight him. What should have been bestowed down was given. The empress didn't discriminate. What her attitude was when the previous 3 imperial sons had married, that was her attitude towards He Ming's marriage. But she seemed to be friendly towards Luo Wenyaro. Coming out of Kue Yuan Palace, Luo Wenyaro's face was slightly red as she walked next to He Ming with her head down. Even though she had dreamed of her husband as one who was well educated and skilled in both martial and literary arts, in reality, she felt that Cheng Wang treated her better and was more steadfast than the one in her dreams. Nothing would be better than to have a place in his heart. Don't worry, Mu Fei is very friendly, she will definitely like you. He Ming saw his wife's nervousness and gripped her hand reassuringly. Don't be afraid. I'll be there with you. Luo Wenyaro gave the smallest of nods, her face blushing harder. And Gui Pin really did like having Luo Wen Yarrow as her Erxi very much. She had a warm personality and a good conduct. The emperor might have neglected her child for so many years, but thankfully the Erxifu he had chosen was a good one. She looked at her Erxifu, whose face was full of embarrassment, and indicated for the palace maid beside her to take out the prepared gifts. She gently grasped Luo Wen Yarrow's hand, smiling as she spoke. "Today, I'm putting Minga into your care. In the future, if Minga does something wrong, don't let him off. Tell me and I will certainly sort him out. Mu Fei is abandoning your son since you have an Erxifu." He Ming stood and raised his hands in a fist. "Mu Fei, don't worry. We will try to live a good life." Seeing the situation, Luo Wen Yarrow perceptively stood and followed in bowing. Her face might have been bashful, but her tone was resolute. "Don't worry, Mu Fei. Erxi will definitely take good care of His Highness and have a good life." And Gui Pin's eyes slightly reddened. She put the two people's hands together and said happily, "It's good to try to have a fulfilling life. A person's life is like a long road. It's a fortunate thing to have someone to walk with along this long road. You have to treasure it." He Ming turned to look at his wife. The hand that held Luo Wen Yarrow's hand tightened as he nodded gravely. The couple left Gui Pin's residence and started to head slowly out of the palace. He Ming noticed that Luo Wen Yarrow kept walking half a step behind him and reached out to grab her hand, remarking, "When we get back, we should go to see to the gifts prepared for the return to your paternal home and check to see if there's anything lacking." Luo Wen Yarrow shook her head and replied in a small voice, "Your Highness has already prepared everything. How could there be anything wrong? I don't know what father and mother-in-law like, so you have to take a look." He Ming smiled as he responded, "Otherwise, what will happen if father and mother-in-law aren't satisfied with their son-in-law?" Luo Wen Yarrow heard his words, and her hand that was being held by He Ming gripped his broad hand. She smiled as she teased, "That's even more of a reason not to help you. If you prepare, it's called being thoughtful. What is it if I prepare it?" The two smiled simultaneously, their hearts gradually becoming closer. Chu Qingju stood at the side of the fake mountain, looking at the sweet young couple not far away. She couldn't resist smiling and remarked to Mu Jin beside her, "Those two are pretty good like this." Mu Jin smiled as she responded, "Wang Fei likes Cheng Wang Fei very much. I like all the good Gunyang." Chu Qingju slowly headed towards Zhongjing Palace. Looking at Mu Jin's confused expression, she smiled and explained, "A young Gunyang, she's more beautiful than the most beautiful flower. A woman's whole life depends on one man, but that one man might not only have her as his only woman. Society is like this. A woman's beauty might be very short or very long, but the only thing in common is that they had all been beautiful. It's just that they've all met different men and had different fates." Mu Jin didn't think that Wang Fei would say such a complicated speech. She mused, "So it's good for Nubi to accompany Wang Fei. Many of the men in this world are fickle, and Nubi won't like them." Chu Qingju felt that Mu Jin was affected by the Duke of Chengde's actions and the body's original owner's mother. She helplessly patted the back of Mu Jin's hand. "I won't force you to do something you're not willing to. But if you meet someone you've fallen in love with in the future, you have to tell me." Mu Jing smiled as she acquiesced, but she didn't put it on her mind. The kind of being that was man, it couldn't even be compared to a handkerchief. At least a handkerchief was useful for wiping things. Men, other than being fickle and emotional, what else could they do? When they had reached Zhongjing Palace, Ding Mema received Chu Qingju and ushered her inside. Only when she had entered did she realize that, aside from Jing Guifei, Wen Gui Pin was also present. She went forward to give a greeting to Jing Guifei first before greeting Wen Gui Pin. Duan Wang Fei has no need to be so courteous. Wen Gui Pin hurriedly stood to return half a greeting. Her face was still fragile, but her mental state seemed much better than last time at the gates of Tianqi Palace. "My, sit down. Hunger's wife, sit down too." Jing Guifei smiled and let the two sit, motioning for a palace maid to serve the pastries her Erxi liked. "Why did you think of coming here today?" Chu Qingju smiled as she looked at the pastries the palace maid served. She gushed to Jing Guifei, "Mu Fei is so good to Erxi, I like eating all of these." She reached out to pop one in her mouth, joyfully swallowing before replying, "Because of Sai Dis wedding these past days, Erxi didn't have the time to enter the palace to greet Mu Fei. One of my Taijian managed to find a few jars of peach wine. I had a taste and found that the wine was light and sweet, perfect for women, so I brought some along to let Mu Fei have a taste. The stuff of the common people might not be as fine as those of the palace, but the taste is unique. Just a few jars of wine, fancy that. You had to send it in. Jing Guifei's tone was reproachful, but the smile on her face became more evident. Such a child, people will laugh at you. When Gui Pin, who was sitting to one side, heard those words and interjected, Guifei Nyang's words will harm this child's heart. Look how filial this child is. She remembers you whenever she gets something and brings it to you. Nyang, what are you unsatisfied with? You don't know her. Today, it's 2 jars of wine, tomorrow it's a few boxes of food, the day after it's some novels. It's all just petty amusements, but she treats them like treasures. Jing Guifei's face was helpless. It's lucky that it's you here today. If it was anyone else, wouldn't it be a laughingstock if it got out? Chu Qingju saw that after Jing Guifei said those words, when Gui Pin seemed to release a breath. She couldn't help but think when Gui Pin was siding with Jing Guifei. Was it that Ning Wang was wagering on the second he? It's the thought that counts. Gaifan Yangying shouldn't disdain her efforts. When Gui Pin smiled as she looked at the docilely seated Chu Qingju, based on what Pin Kie sees, this is a very rare and good Erxi. Jing Guifei smiled as she pointed at Chu Qingju, ordering, why aren't you thanking your Wen Mu Fei for saying good things on your behalf? You have to pour tea for her later. Chu Qingju smiled as she stood to bow to Wen Gui Pin, many thanks to Wen Mu Fei. Wen Gui Pin waved her hand repeatedly as she said she couldn't accept it. She was very courteous in her treatment of Chu Qingju. Jing Guifei smiled as she watched her Erxi personally pour a cup of tea for Wen Gui Pin. Then she naturally helped switch her own cup as well. The mirth in her eyes became even more evident. Chu Qingju ate the noon meal at Jing Guifei's palace before leaving. She walked on the black stone paths of the palace and thought about Wen Gui Pin flattering Jing Guifei. She couldn't help but sigh. In the past, Wen Gui Pin might have been warm and courteous, but she wasn't at this level. This was all for her son. Wang Fei, it seems that Shu Guifei is coming up front, Mu Jin informed in a small voice as she looked at the procession coming towards them. Chu Qingju raised her head to look ahead. On the other side, walking in front of numerous palace maids and Taijian, was Shu Guifei. She moved sideways to retreat to the side of the road. When Shu Guifei drew near, she bowed and greeted, greetings to Shu Guifei. Isn't this Lao Er's wife? Shu Guifei stopped in her steps. She raised an eyebrow as she looked at Chu Qingju, who had her head slightly lowered. She said in a sarcastic voice, after just a few days, Lao Er's wife has become even more beautiful. Thanks, Nyang, for the compliment. Chu Qingju faintly smiled as she gave another bow. Shu Guifei looked coldly at the woman in front of her. Her looks truly were better than her own Erxifu. No wonder she could tempt Lao Er to not walk when he saw her. Thinking that this was her enemy's Erxifu, her tone was icy, but a woman's appearance is not the most important. As a wife, virtue is the most important of them all. Even Jing Guifei hadn't said anything, so how could Shu Guifei act as though she was her popo? Chu Qingju raised her head to glance at Shu Guifei, her voice soft as she responded, Qingju only has a fleeting beauty and can't measure up to the word beautiful. Gaifan Yangying's appearance rivals that of the goddesses. If Qingju could even have a fraction, it would be the greatest fortune in this life. Shu Guifei's face darkened. Those words were complimenting her for being beautiful on the surface, but its true purpose was to block the words she had said previously. She was going to flare up when she heard another person's voice come from behind her. Greetings to Shu Guifei. He Hung had a slight smile as he walked in front of Chu Qingju, his voice reproachful as he said, You went to bother Mu Fei for the noon meal again? Mu Fei cares for me, and knows that I like to eat the food at her place, so she specially let me stay back to eat. Chu Qingju snorted. Just right now, Mu Fei said I was filial. How can you say that I was bothering her? Fine, Mu Fei always protects you. He Hung raised his hands helplessly to Shu Guifei. Mu Fei is partial to my wife. We have let Shu Guifei see a joke. Shu Guifei's smile had already disappeared. These two's words inside and out were implying that they were Jing Guifei's son and Erxi, and thus, she didn't have the qualifications to lecture them. A long time later, she suppressed the anger inside before she spoke. Duan Wang exaggerates. He Heng smiled insincerely as he replied, Shu Guifanyang is magnanimous. If that is the case, then you should leave the palace early. Ben Gong still has to go to Tianqi Palace, and won't keep you. Shu Guifei's hand, that was supported by a palace maid, tightened. That whore Weisha's son, he was just as horrid as Weisha. After Shu Guifei was far away, Chu Qingju came to a realization. So this was the type that Qing the emperor liked. This Shu Guifei could be favored for so many years, it could be inferred that her ancestors must have been generous and virtuous people. What are you thinking? He Heng saw Chu Qingju look as though she had an epiphany, and couldn't help asking. Nothing, I just suddenly felt that intelligence could determine a person's taste. /N Chapter 76 Truth and Falsehood. After Cheng Wang's wedding, the bustling and rumbling Jing city slowly calmed down. It seemed that no one remembered the imprisonment of the eldest imperial son in Bright Moon Tower, nor did they recall the imperial censor who'd rammed himself into a pillar in the court hall. The people who lived in Jing City were the most pragmatic. They would only remember what they should. What they should forget, they definitely wouldn't even remember a hint. Just as everyone was peacefully living their lives, news came out of the palace. The emperor was sick. Shu Guifei and Jing Guifei spent day and night looking after the emperor, but there were still no signs of recovery. Shu Guifei even had a professor of the imperial hospital beaten to death. The emperor was sick, and it was serious. This matter was a sign in Jing. If Shu Guifei had not ordered the death of the imperial hospital's professor, the news wouldn't have been revealed so early. Upon hearing the news, every family's immediate thoughts were different. All the senior officials who were held in the emperor's confidence, such as Qian Jinku, had shut their doors and rejected all who came. There were many who tried to find information from Duan Wang Fu. Excluding Chu Qingju's family, even the paternal families of Fengzi Jin, Jiang Yongyu, and the others had eavesdroppers. These people didn't think it through. What would the paternal family of a Kia of a Wang Fu know? Did they really believe that Duan Wang was an idiot, and would tell such things to a Kia, and in this sensitive time, allow the Kia to pass crucial information to her paternal family? The ones who could only beseech the paternal families of the Kia clearly didn't have any great abilities. It was also clear that their brains weren't any good. They wouldn't be able to climb up any higher in their lifetimes unless the heavens willed it. Chu Qingju listened to Jiang Yongyu report that people had come to seek information from her paternal family and let her sit down below her. My father isn't experienced, and doesn't know anything about this kind of a great matter. He could only decline all of them. Jiang Yongyu presented the letter in her hand to Chu Qingju. This is a list of those who came to visit. My father is timid and took down the names of the people as well as the gifts they have sent. Please have a look, Wang Fei. Chu Qingju took the letter and placed it to one side. She didn't even look at the contents of the letter. She smiled at Jiang Yongyu as she promised, "This must have been bothersome for your parent. I will definitely speak of this matter to Wang Yi." In Chu Qingju's eyes, Jiang Yongyu was the one who saw the situation most clearly in He Heng's Cheshire. She was also the one who had the greatest abilities. She even felt pity for Jiang Yongyu. If Jiang Yongyu hadn't been selected as a female candidate to enter the palace, she would have had good life, marrying a son of a normal rich family as a wife. Jiang Yongyu wasn't surprised that Wang Fei didn't read that letter. Based on Wang Fei's personality and conduct, she definitely wouldn't look at such things. This was Wang Fei's intelligence at work. Newbie's needlework is not yet finished, so I will not disturb Wang Fei any further. Farewell. She had said what she had needed to say. Jiang Yongyu didn't want to rely on Wang Fei to gain Wang Yi's favors. She knew very well now her looks had no chance of being liked by Wang Yi. It was better to walk behind Wang Fei at her tempo. She would have much easier days. Chu Qingju didn't detain her, nodding her head and letting Mu Jing to personally send her out. Jiang Yongyu came out of the door of the room, and thanked Mu Jin repeatedly in order to reject her escort. In the end, Mu Jin still saw her off to the gate of Zhangyuan before turning and leaving. Ari Lu supported Jiang Yongyu as they carefully descended the stairs. She turned back to look at the decreasing figure of Mu Jin, and commented in a small voice, "Mistress, Wang Fei let the most trusted Mu Jin Gunyang to see you off. It shows that Wang Fei puts importance on you." Jiang Yongyu didn't speak. Not long after, she saw Wang Yi walking towards her from another direction. Her steps paused and she lowered her head to bow in greeting to Wang Yi. He Heng noticed that she was coming from the direction of Zhengyuan and asked, "Has Wang Fei not had her noon nap?" Wang Fei has risen just now," Jiang Yongyu obediently answered. He Heng nodded and proceeded to walk in the direction of Zhengyuan, not even looking twice at Jiang Yongyu. Jiang Yongyu straightened her body and raised her head to look at the back of He Heng. She suddenly thought, now that the emperor was seriously ill, if Wang Yi. She shook her head. No matter what, she had to respect and honor Wang Fei. She could see this Wang Fu very clearly. It had been, from very early on, grabbed by Wang Fei. Even if other women entered the Fu in the future, they would just be Wang Yi's playthings. Wang Yi's love towards Wang Fei wasn't a pretense. He Heng carelessly flipped through the list in his hand. Seeing Chu Qingju was tormenting the bonsai again, he remarked, "These people are unimportant." Some were subordinates of Laro-san who'd come to fish. The people of the Jiang family are very sensible. Chu Qingju was carefully trimming out a rabbit's ear. Hearing He Heng's words, her hands stilled. She hadn't thought He Heng would mention what was occurring outside to her. Was it that he really thought of her as one of his people so he didn't even disguise his words? Does Wang Yi mean that San Shu has secretly done something? She put down the scissors. After washing her hands, she said, "Wang Yi, how about I tell you a folk tale?" "What tale?" He Heng saw Chu Qingju's expression was solemn and waved his hand to let the all servants leave the room. He smiled as he urged, "Let me hear it." An old man had 2 sons in his family. The old man was partial to his youngest son and always wanted to give the good things to his younger son. Afterwards, when the old man was seriously ill, the younger son assumed that the old man would leave behind the family property to him. One day, the younger son heard a neighbor say that his father secretly gave the good things to his brother. The younger son was angry and went to argue with his father, who knew that he managed to cause the old man to die. The younger son was very regretful. A while later, he finally found out that what the neighbor said was a lie, but the deceased was already gone and regret was useless. Chu Qingju gave a sigh. "Don't you think that this younger son harmed himself? It isn't a good thing to believe what others say." He Heng smiled and replied, "I've actually heard this story before. Qingju and I really are 2 hearts linked as one." Chu Qingju smiled and talked about some other matters with him before he hurriedly left. She knew inside that what He Heng wanted wasn't her idea but her attitude. This man had ambitions but he didn't want the person in his bed to not have the same stance as him. But he was very satisfied with her as the person in his bed, so he had said what he did to try to feel her out. She hadn't been here for 1 year, but she now understood what was power, and the magnitude of power. With power, a woman could divorce her husband. Without power, one had to kowtow and bow to another. She looked at the letter He Heng had left behind. Chu Qingju reached out to take a look and slowly folded the list, handing it to Mu Jin and told her to carefully hide it away. Mu Jin looked worriedly at her. By now, Jing City was a mess and it was unknown what could happen. Wang Fei. "There's no need to worry. Tell the others to proceed normally, but if there is anyone who dares to talk nonsense, throw them all out of the Fu. No one is to be spared." Chu Qingju commanded with a calm face, "The Cheshire in the Fu cannot pass messages to the outside. If anyone disobeys, report it to me." "Yes." Mu Jin saw Wang Fei seem to be confident and slowly lowered her heart back to its place. Nyang Nyang, a palace maid frantically ran in front of Shu Guifei. Seeing that everyone in the room was a confidant of Shu Guifei, she spoke, "Newbie just managed to get some news from Xiao Dazi in Tianqi Palace. Today, when it was Jing Gaifanyang's turn at care, the emperor praised Duan Wang in front of many people." Shu Guifei had been lying on the recliner since she was massaged by a maid. She instantly sat up when she heard the report, her expression changing as she demanded, The emperor is awake? What did he say? The palace maid knelt down with some fear, replying, Newbie heard that the emperor praised Duan Wang for his conduct, and generosity for being similar to Xiandi. Xiandi? Shu Guifei furrowed her brow. Xiandi had been considered a wise ruler by many. The emperor deeply respected Xiandi and had always exclaimed that he himself wasn't a wise ruler in comparison, and that if Xiandi didn't have him as the only son, he most definitely wouldn't have succeeded the throne. She had heard it many times. Shu Guifei understood the position Xiandi held in the emperor's heart. Now that the emperor was comparing Duan Wang to Xiandi, what did it mean? That year Yuana was born, didn't the emperor say that Yuana's brows were similar to that of Xiandi? Why was he now praising that Hor Weisha's son? Go summon His Highness Rui Wang to the palace. Say that Ben Gong is sick from exhaustion due to constant attendance and let Rui Wang do his filial duty at the emperor's bed. The Yahuan, who was still kneeling on the floor, hesitated but then eventually, silently retreated. At this time, Nyang Nyang was telling the outside that she was ill due to exhaustion from attendance. Wouldn't the others assume that she wasn't willing to constantly attend the emperor? But then again, she was just a low-ranking palace maid. Guifei certainly wouldn't appreciate someone like her voicing an objection. Furthermore, the emperor had always favored Guifei, so it probably wasn't a major matter. In Tianqi Palace, Qingde Emperor woke up from his dreams. Smelling the faint scent of medicine in the room, he fell into a short daze. When he looked outside his canopy, he could only see an indistinct figure sitting outside. She must have been keeping watch over him all this time. His heart warmed and he couldn't resist speaking. Beloved Fei, why haven't you gone to rest yet? Emperor, you are awake. The canopy was raised and Jing Guifei's tearful yet joyful face appeared in his vision. He suddenly understood. The person who'd been keeping watch was Jing Guifei, not Shu Guifei. In an instant, he was slightly afraid. 23 years ago, when he had fainted due to illness, who had been the one crying by his ear? Emperor, what is it? Are you not comfortable? Jing Guifei's face was full of fear. She turned to let the servants call for the Tai who were keeping guard outside before kneeling by his bed and sobbing, Emperor, you really scared Kie. If you really had something wrong, where would that leave Kie? It's not that serious, Qingde Emperor coughed. He reached out to pat the arm she had on the bed. Hunger is already grown up. Why are you still crying like this? It's that since Hunger has grown up, Kie has nothing to worry about. But if you Kie would have no meaning in life, Jing Guifei saw the Tai had come in and stood as she wiped the tears running down her face. She feigned dignity as she ordered, take care in diagnosing the emperor's pulse. If you don't take care, your fate will be the same as the Tai who was beaten to death by Shu Guifei. Nyang Nyang, please don't worry, the Tai bowed to Qingde Emperor before reaching out to feel his pulse. A long time later, he slowly released a breath. Now that Emperor has wakened, it's more than half the road to recovery. But there was too much anger in the recent past which caused the body to weaken. Additionally, the state affairs have increased exhaustion, allowing illness. A short period of rest is all that's needed. You are telling the truth. Jing Guifei didn't care that the Tai was still present as she sobbed. Smiling as she gasped, thank the heavens and earth, thank the heavens and earth. The Tai looked at this scene and felt deeply moved. Didn't they say that Shu Guifei was more favored than Jing Guifei, but why was it that Jing Guifei was the one who had kept watch over the emperor, and would cry from sheer joy due to the emperor's body taking a good turn? Thinking to there, he couldn't help but shake his head inside. The emperor didn't cherish the woman who had a true affection for him, but favored that tyrannical Shu Guifei. The emperor had really wasted Jing Guifei's affections. Quick, write out a prescription for the emperor, Jing Guifei ordered as she wiped her tears. After the emperor recovers, Ben Gong will reward you greatly. After the Tai left, Jing Guifei took a bowl of porridge from a palace maid and served half a bowl to Qingde Emperor. Seeing that Qingde Emperor's complexion had improved, she remarked, seeing Emperor like this, Kie is reminded of 23 years ago. That time, Kie was kneeling at your bed, and was sobbing and begging the heavens at the same time. Kie endured until fainting but didn't see you awaken. She grimaced, but now that Kie has finally seen you awake personally, it truly is the heavens' blessing. 23 years ago, you Qingde Emperor's expression changed. He looked at Jing Guifei's fragile complexion. A beat later, he gave a long sigh, holding her hand as he observed, Jin sees that you are exhausted, go to the side room and rest for a bit. But do as you are told. If you are still worried about Jin will let someone wake you after 4 hours. This is Jin's decree. Qingde Emperor's voice was resolute. Jing Guifei could only helplessly stand and walk out of the main hall. Only when she had lied down in the side hall did a sliver of a smile reveal itself on her lips. Shu Guifei, that good sister of hers, always left these kind of opportunities for her. They made her felt that if she didn't take advantage of those opportunities, it was letting down her good sister. 23 years ago. At that time, the seriously ill emperor didn't have any brothers, only distantly related cousins. She, along with the other Feipin who didn't have children, who hadn't been crying to the heavens to not take the emperor's life. In the main hall of Tianqi Palace, Qingde Emperor stared in a daze as he lay on the bed before he asked a Taijian standing in the corner, "Where is Shu Guifei?" "Emperor, last night, after Shu Guifei attended to you, she caught a cold. At midnight, she was supported by the palace maids back to her palace to rest and recover from her illness." The person speaking was the chief steward of the Taijian. He informed in a small voice, "This morning, a servant came to report. They said that Shu Guifei Nyang was exhausted and most likely will become weakened if she doesn't rest and recover." Then when did Jing Guifei Nyang start to attend Jin? Qingde Emperor's expression was slightly cold. Jing Guifei Nyang was in attendance starting from when she had heard you fainted. The chief Taijian peeked at the emperor's expression and carefully continued, "This morning, Jing Guifei Nyang fainted once from exhaustion but Nyang wasn't willing to leave. Nukai didn't dare to persuade too strongly so Nyang hadn't closed her eyes for 2 complete days. Jin knows now." Qingde Emperor closed his eyes. Just when the chief Taijian thought he had fell asleep, he once again spoke, "Let the imperial kitchen simmer the lily yam pigeon soup for Jing Guifei. Jin remembers that she likes this one." The chief Taijian hurriedly confirmed before retreating. After he came out of the door to the main hall, he looked at the horizon dyed red by the setting sun. This sky was most likely going to change. In the quiet main hall, Qingde Emperor let out a sigh. Had he been wrong all these years? Previous Emperor /N. Chapter 77. When He Hung brought Chu Qingju to Tianqi Palace, the children of the emperor along with their mothers were all present. Chu Qingju even saw some unfamiliar princesses and their fuma, but these people were evidently not valued by Qingde Emperor and silently stood to one side. The person sitting next to the dragon bed was none other than Jing Guifei. She saw her son and Erxi come in but didn't pay any attention to them and persisted in her efforts to feed Qingde Emperor his entire medicine before announcing, "Emperor, Hunger and Erxi have arrived." Qingde Emperor's mental state was much better compared to when he had first woke up yesterday. He watched as his son and Erxi bowed in greeting before waving his hand, "Stand up, no need for such protocol." He indicated for a Taijian to bring a bench for the two to sit. Chu Qingju detected that the smile Qingde Emperor directed towards Jing Guifei was especially warm and his eyes, as he looked at He Heng, was kinder than in the past. She strangely felt her back turning cold. He was only sick for a few days, but why did Qingde Emperor seem strange? She looked at the still-standing Feipin and princesses, and saw He Heng pulling his stool closer to sit next to the bed. She followed to sit next to He Heng and watched obediently as Jing Guifei warmly placed a cushion for Qingde Emperor and gently put a blanket over Qingde Emperor as though, in the eyes of Jing Guifei, Qingde Emperor was a more important existence than her own son. Her eyebrow slightly twitched. Chu Qingju felt that she thought something she shouldn't have. She silently moved her gaze to He Heng and saw He Heng appeared to be deeply worried as he looked at Qingde Emperor. She also adjusted her expression and tried not to get left behind. Has Fu Huang gotten better? A few days ago, Chen heard Fu Huang's body wasn't well and felt so worried. Chen waited at Tianqi Palace many times but didn't see you awaken. Today, your state looks much better and this son can finally be at ease. He Heng's expression slightly relaxed as he examined Qingde Emperor's complexion before saying, "This son was unfilial for not being in attendance the entire time that Fu Huang was ill. You are an adult now, and there are many affairs at court. You can't keep watch over Jin all the time. Qingde Emperor smiled and glanced at Jing Guifei. Your Mufei has taken very good care of Jin. Jin understands your filial piety. Chu Qingju raised her eyelids to look at Jing Guifei but only saw a faint smile on the other's face. These last few days, Jing Guifei didn't have it easy. The empress, who had been silent all this time, spoke. She came forward and stood next to the bed. He Heng and Chu Qingju stood to move to one side. There wasn't any reason for them to remain seated when the empress was standing. Emperor, after you recover, you have to greatly reward Jing Guifei. The last 2 days, Kie tried many times to get her to rest, but she couldn't bear to part from you. When the empress spoke to her, she gave a helpless sigh at Jing Guifei. After just a few short days, she's thinned a whole circle. Not just you, Emperor. Even I feel pain looking at her. Qingde Emperor nodded. Her regard, Jin knows. The empress smiled, not a hint of jealousy on her face. From what Chu Qingju saw, the empress was very satisfied with the present situation. That made her suspect that the empress might be on the same side as her popo. Emperor, Shu Guifei and His Highness Rui Wang are asking for an audience. The chief Taijian came in, and after seeing the relaxed mood inside the room, he informed in a small voice, His Highness Cheng Wang and Chang Wang Fei are also waiting outside the hall to be summoned. She didn't know what Qingde Emperor seemed to be thinking, given his brow had slightly furrowed. Let them all come in. Looking at his true love and his most favored son come in, what was Qingde Emperor's expression? Why was Jing Guifei smiling so warmly and the empress's smile so cold? This situation seemed fishy. Shu Guifei took her son and Erxi with her as she walked in the front, and He Ming and Luo when Yarrow walking behind them. After the 5 performed their greetings, Qingde Emperor didn't bestow any of them a seat and only asked Shu Guifei, Jin heard you became ill from attending on Jun, are you better? The rims of Shu Guifei's eyes were slightly red as she walked to the bed, sobbing as she choked out, Kie is fine. Everything became fine when Emperor woke up. It is Kie's body that's useless. Otherwise, Kie would have kept constant guard and served Emperor. Jing Guifei has taken very good care of Jin. It wasn't a hindrance when you weren't present, Qingde Emperor faintly returned. He looked at his favored son and the He Ming couple, coughing a few times before stating, Jin isn't in any serious danger, you don't have to worry. He Yuan was reminded of what Mu Fei had said to him and saw Fu Huang looked very close to Jing Guifei. He felt discontented inside, but on the surface, he had to smile as he replied, seeing Fu Huang as well, a Chen can rest the heart. Yen, Qingde Emperor nodded. Seeing the room was full of people, he let the other Fei Pin, princesses, and Fuma all leave. When only a few were left, he said, this illness of Jin this time, it made you all worry. Everyone replied that as long as nothing was wrong with the emperor, that was the best, and now the emperor had to take care of his body and so on. Now that you have all grown up and settled down, Jin is very content, Qingde Emperor sighed, his gaze sweeping across his 3 sons and their Wang Fei behind them. He gave a few more harsh coughs, Jin is growing old. You all have to put more effort into state matters and help lighten the load for Jin. The 3 He brothers instantly agreed, and said they would be willing to die for Fu Huang and so forth. Shu Guifei's heart became more and more insecure. Why was the emperor saying these things? Didn't he favor Yuana the most? Why did it seem he was treating them equally? All right, Jin is tired, you can all leave. Qingde Emperor thought for a second, Jing Guifei stays. Shu Guifei's expression changed slightly. Seeing the emperor had already closed his eyes to rest, she could only close her mouth. She looked at the mirth on Jing Guifei's face and felt that her smile seemed to be mocking her. Coming out of Tianqi Palace, the smile that Shu Guifei had pasted on disappeared and her face darkened. She glared icily at He Heng and Chu Qingju before taking He Yuan and Qin Bai Lu with her as she left. Chu Qingju turned and saw the smile on He Heng's face. As she stepped on the white jade steps, she asked, what is Wang Yi smiling about? Fu Huang's body is recovering, naturally I'm happy. He Heng smiled as he glanced at her, don't you think so? This kind of event is naturally worthy of joy. Chu Qingju smiled as she nodded. She turned her head to look at He Ming and Luo when Yarrow walking behind them. The Fu hired a Shu cuisine chief a few days ago. How about Sai Shu and Sai Demei come for the noon meal? Luo Wenyaro turned to look at He Ming. Seeing him nod, she then answered, to taste the gourmet food at Bo and Soros Fu, it is our good fortune. Chu Qingju smiled, eating is a type of good fortune. You don't have to say these things to me. Luo Wenyaro gave a bashful smile, evidently embarrassed. Seeing the situation, He Ming bowed in apology to Chu Qingju. Seeing him protect Luo Wenyaro, Chu Qingju smiled. All right, if one didn't know, they would think that I, as your Sorosoro, is bullying you too. Spare me. He Hung smiled as he saw the intimacy between Chu Qingju and Luo Wenyaro. Holding her hand, he interrupted, I think you should pay attention to walking. Otherwise, a trip and fall would damage your looks. I'm not a child, Chu Qingju sniffed, but docilely allowed He Hung to pull her along. Luo Wenyaro followed behind them. Seeing the clasped hands of the two, a smile appeared on her face. When Shu Guifei returned to her palace, she let all the servants in the room leave. She looked at her son, who also didn't have a good expression, and asked in a lowered voice, Yuana, I'm afraid that the emperor might want to pass the throne to He Hung. He Yuan's brows furrowed. How come? Shu Guifei carefully narrated the chain of events before concluding, the emperor's heart has changed. She really found it hard to accept that the emperor would one day choose Wei Yishe and slight her. But just now in Tianqi Palace, the emperor treated that whore Wei Yishe much more intimately than her. After just 2 short days, why was it this way? Was it that the emperor was angry that she didn't serve him? But her body had become uncomfortable, so she had to leave. Or was it that Wei Yishe said some words disadvantageous to her in front of the emperor? Are you sure that Fu Huang said that Laroa seemed similar to Shendi? He Yuan thought deeply for a long time, and shook his head to refute. It can't be so, Fu Huang has never treated Laroa better than me. Why would he suddenly change his opinion? Maybe it's Jing Guifei who's purposefully spreading false information? I got suspicious as well, but you also saw the attitude the emperor had towards Wei Yishe today, Shu Guifei coldly argued. The emperor's heart has definitely changed. We cannot wait to be defeated. Yuana, I won't let what belongs to you be taken away by others. He Yuan ranted. Fu Huang really feels that Wei Yishe and her son is better than us. Is he blind? When Qin Bailu, who was in the corner, heard these words, her heart jumped and she couldn't resist pushing deeper into the corner. She sneaked a look at the ugly visage of He Yuan and couldn't seem to remember what the Rui Wang she fell in love with 2 years ago looked like. Yuana. Shu Guifei heard He Yuan's words, her expression instantly changing, and disapprovingly said in a small voice, how can you even say such things? But previously, Fu Huang clearly said the only one of importance in the Hugong was you, and the most loved imperial son was me, but what is the reality? He Yuan became more and more furious. Wei Yishe just cared for him during his illness, and his attitude completely changed. Is that how he would act if he'd really cared for us? But he's the emperor. Shu Guifei's eyes reddened and she used her handkerchief to wipe the corner of her eyes. She cried, if his heart changes, what can we do? There's always a way. He Hung looked at Shu Guifei, his face gradually calming. Wei Yishe can try to compete for favor. Mu Fei, you have so many years of feelings with Fu Huang, how can you lose to her? Shu Guifei thought about the coldness in the emperor's eyes as he looked at her and nodded. As for He Heng, He Yuan gave a cold smile. No matter who he resembles, only the person who laughs to the end is the winner. Before, I was more favored than him. In the future, I won't lose to him. In Tianqi Palace, Jing Guifei looked at the sleeping emperor. She slowly drew her hand out of the emperor's hand. She looked calmly at the old man on the bed, the corners of her lips rising. What was having missed these years? The emperor was becoming fonder of making jokes, but it was a pity that after these many years, this kind of joke wasn't funny anymore. Chapter 78. It was the first time that Luo Wenyaro visited Duan Wang Fu. She found that Duan Wang Fu was more magnificent and refined than Cheng Wang Fu. She couldn't help squeezing He Ming's hand, feeling sympathy for this person who was walking beside her. He Ming assumed she was nervous and smiled at her. Whatever you like to eat, tell us so. We shouldn't try to scrimp for them. Even if you want to be frugal, you couldn't save. He Hung smiled as he led the others into the front hall. After everyone had sat down, he teased, Your Asoro takes great care of her eating and wardrobe. With her here, it isn't possible to save. Wang Yi dislikes the fact that I eat too much. Chu Qng Ju took a teacup from a yahuan and sniffed upon hearing his words. I'm happy you have such a good appetite, I wouldn't dislike it. He Hung smiled as he ordered, Qian Chang Xin, go hasten the kitchen and have them make that peanut pastry that Wang Fei likes. Otherwise, your Wang Fei won't forgive me today. Nonsense. If they didn't know, they would assume that I was a shrew. Chu Qingju put down her teacup and burst into laughter. Sai Shu and Sai Demei are still here. You just want them here to laugh at me. Asoro, I didn't see or hear anything. He Ming smiled as he followed up. Ji and Asoro are indulging in conjugal love. Us, being Didi and Demei, can only be happy for you, not laugh at you. Luo Wen Yarrow used a handkerchief to cover the smile on her lips. Even though she didn't speak, the uneasiness between the four people slowly disappeared. Chu Qingju could see that He Ming was desirous of becoming closer to He Hung. He Hung evidently accepted He Ming's goodwill, so her own attitude towards He Ming was very carefree. On the matter of how to treat people, if He Hung called himself second, there wasn't anyone that dared call themselves first. As expected, the topic slowly skewed towards the matter of He Ming being attacked. He Hung held a teacup as he put in, based on my opinion, Sai Di's attack by assassins might not be connected with San Di, but the case of Jiang Nan definitely is connected to San Di. He Ming nodded and said nonchalantly, since Fu Huang isn't investigating further, I will not think more. Either way, I'm fine right now. It's not important who did it as long as I can have a good life from now. Hearing the words, Chu Qingju felt that He Ming was probably the least ambitious and the most easily satisfied among the four He brothers. But it was due helplessness. He Qi was the eldest. He Hung had a useful mother. He Yuan had the favor. What did He Ming have? His mother wasn't favored, his father didn't care for him. If his own attitude wasn't good, how would he live? Maybe He Ming understood in his mind that these matters had the shadow of He Hung, so he would say all would be well if he could have a good life in the future. This was expressing his attitude towards He Hung. The meaning might be that he, as the younger brother, was siding with Laro. The peanut pastries came up. Chu Qingju picked a piece to put in her mouth. Her gaze fell upon Luo Wen Yarrow and saw her eating pastries thoughtlessly. Chu Qingju smiled. It didn't matter if she knew or she really didn't know, but this girl wasn't stupid. At least, she seemed smarter than Qin Bai Lu. Days always become better, He Hung smiled, it's very good that Sai Di has such goals. He Ming smiled upon hearing the words. Even his eyes were full of visible mirth. They chatted and when it was noon time, the four of them sat at the table and watched the yahuan present the dishes. The dishes of Shu cuisine were mostly sour and spicy. The He color alone gave the viewer the impression of very hot and delicious. Even though most of the table was Shu cuisine, there were some bland dishes. Chu Qingju had no immunity to good food. In her own home, she didn't want others to serve her. One of the great pleasures in experiencing delicious food was reaching out to the dishes she liked herself. The Sichuan poached fish was made from the tenderest part of the fish belly. For the meat, one had to use the fresh meat from the pig's leg. The pickled cabbage in the dish was well-aged pickled cabbage so that when one took a sniff, their saliva would spill. The fish head and tofu soup were densely flavorful, the roasted tendons were crisp yet smooth. There were also some mushrooms with cabbage, steamed wild mushroom and other such dishes. The raw ingredients for those dishes weren't any special things, but the taste that was created was able to make Chu Qingju eat another bowl of rice. Chu Qingju would never try to preserve her impression in front of He Hung through eating one less bowl of rice. After she elegantly yet swiftly finished 2 bowls of rice, she rinsed her mouth and washed her hands. Afterwards, she slowly wiped her mouth as she looked at the table full of food. She spoke with some regret, "Tonight, let's eat hot pot. It's much more enjoyable with 4 people." Luo Wen Yarrow knew of hot pot, but before she married, her family rarely ate it. Her family felt it was inelegant to crowd around a pot to cook food. Hearing Asoro's suggestion, she felt her heart move. She couldn't help asking, "Is it 2 soup pot?" "Of course. If the moon tonight isn't bad, We could set the pots up in the pavilion outside and admire the moon as we eat. We don't have to care about the rules of not talking while eating. Tell some interesting stories, it would be great. Chu Qingju felt that Hot Pot needed more people gathered around telling tall tales. If they didn't happen, then Hot Pot wasn't perfect. He Ming didn't think that a soror would be like this in private. He looked with some degree of shock at Ge and found that his gaze was on a soror, a wide smile on his face. In this instant, he understood. Alright, if that's the case, then Sai Di and Sai Demei won't leave tonight. After the evening meal, just sleep for the night at the Fu. It will be refreshing. He Hung called in Ming He and ordered him to let the kitchen servants prepare. After he finished, he added another sentence, prepare more wild mushrooms. Yes, Ming He knew that Wang Fei liked eating all kinds of fungi. Wang Yi was taking care of Wang Fei. Demei, this is your first time at the Fu. Why don't we take a walk? After eating, if one sits too long, they'll gain weight. Chu Qingju smiled as she stood, giving the two He brothers the room to talk. Then I will trouble a soror. Luo Wenyaro also stood and followed Chu Qingju to walked out of the front hall. She herself also knew that Wang Yi most likely had things to discuss with Duan Wang. He Ming watched as his wife followed Caozi out before asking, Ge, a soror's paternal family Chang de Gongfu was on He Yuan's side. Even he knew that. She doesn't have good relations with the Chu family. These years, she endured a lot from the Chu family. He Hung's brows furrowed. When the Chu family was mentioned, it always caused a bad mood. The people of Chang de Gongfu, you don't have to have any qualms. Your soror won't care about it. He Ming nodded. If that's the case, the matter of the Chu and Liang families, I'll get someone to leak. Families like this one, they shouldn't have been kept for this long. He Hung remembered the wrongs that the Chu family had done to Chu Qingju and coldly ordered, keep them alive. Living but having nothing, it's better than death. He hadn't expected that Ge would dislike the Chu family that much. He Ming nodded in a daze. He remembered that the Chu family had a daughter who was a Kier in He Yuan's Fu and mused, I wonder if Sanji would help. What Laro-san is like, is he the kind of person to give aid for a Kier? He Hung raised a teacup to take a sip and scorned, he always enjoys having people revolve around him, when would he revolve around someone else? That's true, these years, He Yuan was arrogant even when interacting with him, much less a Cheshire. A smile appeared on his face. That Chu family is quite pitiful. Luo Wenyaro and Chu Qingju took a tour of the gardens before going to the Zhengyuan. When she saw the furnishings in Chu Qingju's room, she couldn't do anything except gape. Glass lanterns worth cities, a night luminous pearl of great craftsmanship and a variety of other finely made decorations. She had heard her grandmother mention when Duan Wang Fei married, the Chu family didn't add much to the dowry. What she brought to the Wang Fu was the dowry that her birth mother had when she married into Chang de Gongfu and the additions that the Tian family and other relatives and friends added. Luo Wenyaro's dowry could be considered to be very generous, but seeing that the decorations in this room were finer than the objects in her dowry, so she knew very clearly, these objects wasn't Duan Wang Fei's dowry. Rather, it was what Duan Wang had brought for her. Thinking about the gift that Duan Wang Fei added to her dowry before she married, Luo Wenyaro couldn't help but exclaim, a beau treats a soror so well. Hearing this, Chu Qingju gave a light laugh. She pulled the other to sit by the window. A white jade orchid was blooming right outside the window. Sai Shu treats you very well too. Chu Qingju smiled as she looked at Luo Wenyaro. I can see that Sai Shu treats you truly well. This is the best scenario. Hearing this, Luo Wenyaro gave a sweet smile. For some reason, she felt it strange that a soror used the word truly. She hesitantly glanced at Chu Qingju, her gaze somehow coming to rest at the orchid outside the window. This flower is very beautiful. Many in Jing City like to plant orchids in their gardens because of the rumor was if orchids were planted in the home, their lives would become better and better. Some lovers like to exchange orchids and use white jade orchids to represent the sincerity of their love. Luo Wenyaro didn't know what the truth was, but she believed that if a man would go to such an effort to seek out these objects to give to a woman, no matter what, the woman occupied a spot of some size in his heart. She looked at the faint smile on Chu Qingju's face, hesitantly offering, a person's heart can be seen slowly through interacting. There isn't a clear line between truth and lies. The hand Chu Qingju held a teacup with slightly paused. She looked at Luo Wenyao. She didn't know if the other was speaking of Himing or if she meant something else. She followed Luo Wenyao's gaze to look at the orchid outside the window, smiling and responding, "You are right. It's not so easy to separate truth and lies. It's better to work towards a better life." Suro's words are sensible. Luo Wenyao smiled as she nodded. She pointed at the orchid outside. Just like the orchid flower, the days would become more and more beautiful. Chu Qingju blew on the surface of the tea and lazily glanced at the orchid. She suddenly remembered that a short while ago He Hung had sent over a set of orchid hairpins and jewelry. But due to the fact that He Hung would always send things over all the time, she had never worn the set of orchid jewelry. Musing, she curled her lips. A good life was controlled by people. Was it possible to live well just by depending on a flower? You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.